When Lena Hart fled Chicago 7 months pregnant, she thought disappearing would protect her baby from the crime empire's ruthless heir. She changed her name, her life, everything except the truth. You can't hide a child from a man who owns half the city. Now, 43 hours into the most brutal labor of her life in a small Tennessee hospital, exhausted and vulnerable, she's about to discover that Adrian Russo never stopped watching. He knows where she is. He knows about the baby. And he's standing in her hospital room with an offer that will shatter everything she thought she'd escaped. If you're hooked already, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Lena and Adrian's story travels. Now, let's dive in. Boom. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital buzzed like dying insects, casting sterile shadows across the recovery room where Lena Hart lay trembling. 43 hours. That's how long she'd fought to bring Isabella into this world. 43 hours of agony that had shredded her body and very nearly her will to survive. The epidural had failed twice. The attending physician, a tired woman with kind eyes, had mentioned the word emergency more times than Lena could count. But Isabella had finally arrived at 3:47 a.m., screaming her fury at the world with lungs that worked perfectly, thank God, and 10 tiny fingers that wrapped around Lena's thumb with surprising strength. Now, at nearly dawn, Lena held her daughter against her chest in the dim quiet, feeling the soft weight of her, breathing in that indescribable newborn smell that was somehow both sweet and ancient. Isabella's dark hair, so much of it, crowned her small head in soft waves. Her eyes, when they'd briefly opened, had been that deep slate blue that all babies had, but Lena had seen something else there too. Something that made her chest tighten with both love and an emotion she refused to name. She looked like him. Lena pushed the thought away viciously, the way she'd been doing for 7 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. She'd gotten good at it, the forgetting, the denying, the rewriting of her own history. She had to be. Survival demanded it. Outside her window, Knoxville was beginning to wake. She could hear the distant rumble of early morning traffic on I-40, the chirp of birds in the trees that lined the hospital's parking lot, the hydraulic sigh of a delivery truck somewhere below. Normal sounds, safe sounds, sounds that had nothing to do with Chicago, with the life she'd abandoned, with the man she'd loved and feared in equal measure. Adrian Russo. Even thinking his name felt dangerous, like speaking a curse aloud in the dark. So she didn't. Instead, she focused on Isabella, on the miracle of her, on the impossible fact that this perfect creature had somehow been created from such complicated, damaged parts. "You're safe now," Lena whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming during labor. "I promise you. Whatever it takes, you're safe." The door to her room was closed. She'd made sure of that, had asked the night nurse, a sweet woman named Patricia, to please keep it shut. No visitors, no exceptions. Patricia had agreed with the weary sympathy of someone who'd seen too many young mothers alone in recovery, who knew better than to ask questions that wouldn't be answered. Lena shifted slightly in the bed, wincing as pain radiated from the surgical incision low on her abdomen. Emergency C-section, finally, after Isabella's heart rate had dropped during hour 41. The obstetrician had moved fast, explaining in calm, rapid sentences about fetal distress and necessary intervention, and Lena had simply nodded, beyond caring about anything except getting her baby out safely. She'd made it. They'd made it. 7 months of running, of working double shifts at a diner where nobody asked about her past, of sleeping in a studio apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant where the smell of pho perpetually seeped through the floorboards. All of it had led to this moment. Mother and daughter, together, alive, anonymous. The name on her hospital bracelet read Lena Mitchell, not Hart, which had been her mother's maiden name and the identity she'd assumed when she first fled Chicago. Not her real surname, which she'd buried so deep she sometimes forgot it herself. Mitchell was her third reinvention, chosen because it was common enough to disappear into, forgettable enough that no one would look twice. She'd paid cash for everything. Prenatal visits at a community clinic that served undocumented immigrants and runaways. The fake ID she'd bought from a guy her coworker knew, someone who specialized in fresh starts, and didn't ask why you needed one. Even the hospital deposit. She'd scraped together $3,000 over 6 months, keeping it in an envelope under her mattress because banks required social security numbers and paper trails. Paper trails led to Chicago, to the Russo family, to Adrian, to the man whose child now slept against her heart. Lena closed her eyes, letting exhaustion wash over her. The painkillers they'd given her made everything soft around the edges, like she was watching the world through gauze. She could sleep now. Patricia had promised to bring Isabella to the nursery for a few hours. Let Lena recover, but Lena had refused. She wasn't letting this baby out of her sight. Not now, not ever. The room's darkness was just beginning to gray with approaching dawn when Lena heard it, a sound so subtle she almost dismissed it as imagination. The soft click of a door opening, the whisper of expensive shoes on linoleum. Her eyes snapped open. A man stood just inside her hospital room, silent as a shadow, backlit by the hallway's fluorescent glow. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than she'd earned in 6 months of slinging hash at the diner. His face was in shadow, but Lena didn't need to see it. She knew. She'd know him anywhere. Her body went rigid with recognition and terror. Isabella stirred against her chest, making a small sound of protest. "Hello, Lena." His voice was exactly as she remembered, low, controlled, with that faint Chicago accent that softened his consonants and made every word sound like both a promise and a threat. Adrian Russo stepped forward, and the dim light from her bedside monitor caught his features. Those sharp cheekbones. That strong jaw. Eyes so dark they looked black in the shadows, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. 7 months. She'd run 7 months ago, disappeared in the middle of a September night with nothing but a backpack and the clothes on her back. She'd covered her tracks meticulously. No phone, no credit cards, no contact with anyone from her old life. She'd chosen Knoxville because it was medium-sized and unremarkable, far enough from Chicago to feel like another world. And yet, here he stood. "How?" Her voice came out as a croak. She cleared her throat, tried again. "How did you find me?" Adrian moved closer, his steps measured and deliberate. He looked different than she remembered. Harder, maybe. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. A tightness to his jaw that spoke of sleepless nights and grinding tension. But he was still devastatingly handsome in that way that had always undone her, masculine and dangerous and somehow gentle all at once. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" He stopped at the foot of her bed, his gaze dropping to the bundle in her arms. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that careful control. "Did you think I wouldn't find her?" Her Isabella. Their daughter. Lena's arms tightened protectively. "You need to leave. Now." "I'm not here to hurt you." Adrian's voice was soft, almost wounded. "I've never wanted to hurt you, Lena. You know that." "I know what you are," she shot back, her fear crystallizing into anger. "I know what your family does, what you do. That's why I left." "You left because you were scared." He moved around the side of the bed, and despite herself, despite everything, Lena's breath caught. He was so close now she could smell his cologne, that same cedar and bergamot scent that used to cling to his shirts when she wore them in the morning. "You found out you were pregnant and you ran because you thought I'd, what, force you into something? Hurt the baby?" "Your father tried to have my brother killed over a gambling debt," Lena said, her voice shaking. "Your uncle runs half the prostitution in Illinois. Your family's name is attached to more bodies than I can count. So yes, Adrian, I ran, and I'd do it again." She expected anger, expected the cold fury she'd seen flash in his eyes before, when someone challenged him or questioned his authority. Instead, he just looked tired. "My father is dead," Adrian said quietly. "Heart attack 3 months ago, and my uncle—" He paused, something dark passing over his face. "Vincent won't be hurting anyone anymore. I made sure of that." Lena stared at him, trying to process this information through the fog of exhaustion and medication. Dominic Russo, dead. She should feel relieved. The old man had been a monster. Everyone knew it. But all she felt was a creeping dread. "You're in charge now." It wasn't a question. "I am." Adrian's gaze returned to Isabella, and his entire expression softened in a way that made Lena's chest ache. "Can I see her, please?" "No." The word came out fiercer than she'd intended. "You don't get to show up here and—" "Her name is Isabella Grace Mitchell," Adrian interrupted, his voice still gentle but underlaid with something harder now. "Born at 3:47 a.m., 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She has your nose and my hair. The delivery was complicated. They almost lost you both during hour 41. Your blood pressure spiked and they performed an emergency cesarean. You refused an epidural at first, Changed your mind at hour 23 when the pain became unbearable, but the anesthesiologist was in another surgery, and by the time they got to you, it was too late for it to take effect properly. Each detail hit Lena like a physical blow. He knew everything. The names she'd used, the hospital she'd chosen, every agonizing hour of her labor. Which meant, "You've been watching me." The words came out hollow. "This whole time." "Protecting you," Adrian corrected. He pulled something from his inner jacket pocket, a slim folder, and set it on the rolling table beside her bed. "Do you remember Marcus Delgado?" Lena's blood ran cold. She remembered. A loan shark from her old neighborhood. Someone her idiot ex-boyfriend had borrowed money from before she'd been smart enough to leave him. Marcus had threatened her, months before she'd even met Adrian, promised he'd collect one way or another. "He found you in October," Adrian continued, his voice conversational now, like they were discussing the weather. "Followed you home from work one night. He was going to grab you in the parking lot, take you somewhere private to discuss payment methods." Lena's hands were shaking. She hadn't known, hadn't seen anyone following her. "He didn't touch you because I had men watching. They intercepted him 2 blocks from your apartment, convinced him that pursuing you further would be a terminal mistake." Adrian's dark eyes met hers. "He won't be bothering you again. He won't be bothering anyone." The implication hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. Lena wanted to feel horror, wanted to condemn him for the violence implicit in those words. But all she felt was a sick sort of relief. "There were others," Adrian said, opening the folder with careful fingers. Inside were photographs, documents, names she didn't recognize. "A registered sex offender who lived 2 floors below you. I had him evicted and ensured he understood that East Tennessee was no longer safe for him. Your landlord, who was planning to raise your rent beyond what you could afford, he suddenly came into some money and decided to renovate his other properties instead. The man who hit you with his car in November. That was an accident," Lena protested weakly. "He was drunk. 3 prior DUIs. He ran a stop sign and clipped your hip in a crosswalk." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You didn't report it because you were afraid of the attention. He drove away. I found him." Lena didn't ask what had happened to the driver. She wasn't sure she could handle knowing. "The clinic where you got your prenatal care was struggling financially," Adrian continued, his tone never varying from that calm, measured delivery. "I made an anonymous donation. Your coworker Sarah, the one with the sick kid, her son needed a bone marrow transplant. The hospital suddenly found a match. Your landlord's boiler broke in January, and you spent 3 nights in an apartment with no heat while you were 8 months pregnant. The next day, a new heating system was installed, building-wide." He was listing these things like they were simple facts, business transactions. But each one landed in Lena's chest like a stone, building weight, building pressure. "Stop," she whispered. Adrian closed the folder. "You thought you were alone. You thought you were invisible. But I've been watching every moment, Lena, every single day, making sure you were safe, making sure you had what you needed, making sure that when this day came," his gaze dropped to Isabella again, and something raw and vulnerable flashed across his face. "When my daughter was born, you'd both survive it. She's not your daughter," Lena said, knowing it was a lie even as the words left her mouth. "You have no claim. I have every claim." Adrian's voice didn't rise, but the force behind it was unmistakable. "She's mine. You know it. I know it, and running won't change that." Lena felt tears burning her eyes, hot and furious. "What do you want, Adrian? Why are you here?" "I'm here because you're the mother of my child, and you just survived surgery. I'm here because for 7 months I've respected your need for distance, but that ends now." He reached into his jacket again, this time producing a small stack of papers. "I'm also here because we need to discuss the future." He set the papers on the table next to the folder, and Lena saw letterhead from a law firm, Chicago-based, prestigious, the kind of lawyers who defended senators and CEOs. "What is this?" "Custody agreements, financial arrangements, protection details." Adrian's expression was unreadable. "We can do this the easy way, or we can make it complicated. Your choice." "My choice?" Lena's laugh was bitter and broken. "You show up here, tell me you've been stalking me for months, and then present legal documents like we're negotiating a business deal? Would you prefer I take her?" The question was soft, almost gentle, but the threat underneath was clear as crystal. "I could, you know. I have lawyers who could have her declared in danger due to your unstable living situation. I have doctors who could testify about your lack of prenatal care. I went to every appointment at a free clinic that's under investigation for malpractice. I have evidence of your multiple false identities, your flight across state lines, your pattern of deception. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. I could bury you in court, Lena. I could take Isabella today and you'd never see her again. Is that what you want? The tears spilled over now, tracking hot down Lena's cheeks. She hated him in that moment, hated him with a ferocity that shocked her. But she also knew he was telling the truth. The Russo family had judges in their pocket, prosecutors on payroll, enough money and influence to bend the law into whatever shape they needed. So what? She choked out. I sign your papers and become your mistress? Your captive? My wife. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying. Lena stared at him. What? Adrian straightened, reaching for the top document in the stack. Marriage license, already filled out. We need your signature. The ceremony is arranged for next week. Small, private, just family. You're insane. Lena's voice was rising now, verging on hysteria. I'm not marrying you. We haven't seen each other in 7 months, Adrian. You can't just... I can, and I will. His voice remained calm, implacable. Isabella deserves her father's name. She deserves the protection that comes with being a Russo. And you... Something softened in his expression, just for a moment. You deserve better than running, better than hiding, better than working yourself to death in some diner, living in fear that someone from your past will find you. Someone did find me, Lena shot back. You. Because I never stopped looking. Adrian moved closer, and before Lena could pull away, he reached out and gently, carefully, brushed a strand of sweat-dampened hair back from her forehead. The gesture was so tender, it made her throat close. 7 months, Lena. 7 months of wondering if you were safe, if you were eating enough, if you were getting proper medical care. 7 months of tracking you from a distance because I knew if I got too close, you'd run again. Do you have any idea what that was like? Do you have any idea what it was like to find out the man you were falling in love with was a criminal? Lena countered, her voice breaking. To realize that the future you imagined was built on blood and violence? To know that bringing a child into that world was... The world is violent with or without me, Adrian interrupted. At least with me, you're protected from it. At least with me, Isabella will never know hunger or fear or danger. She'll know her father is a monster. The words came out harsher than Lena had intended, and she saw Adrian flinch, actually flinch, like she'd struck him. Maybe, he said quietly. But she'll know her father loves her. She'll know he'd burn the world down before he let anyone hurt her. Can you say the same for what you were offering? Working minimum wage, moving from town to town every time you got scared? What kind of life is that? Lena wanted to argue, wanted to defend the life she'd been building, but the truth was she couldn't. She'd been living in constant fear, one paycheck from homelessness, one background check away from exposure. She told herself it was enough, that love would compensate for everything they'd lack. But now, holding Isabella, she wasn't so sure. I need time, she finally said, to think, to... You have until morning. Adrian checked his watch, a Rolex that probably cost more than her car. I've arranged for your discharge at 9 a.m. A car will be waiting. You can come willingly, or... He let the sentence trail off, the unspoken threat clear. Or you'll take her anyway. Lena's voice was hollow. I'll do what I have to do to protect my daughter, just like you did. His expression softened again, and he bent down, bringing his face level with Isabella's. For a long moment, he just looked at her, and Lena saw something crack in his carefully maintained facade. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. She's perfect. Thank you. For keeping her safe. For bringing her into this world. Then he was moving toward the door, his footsteps as silent as when he'd entered. Adrian, wait! He paused, hand on the doorframe, looking back over his shoulder. The papers, Lena said weakly. I can't just... I need to read them. I need to understand. My lawyer's number is on the cover sheet. Call him if you have questions. Adrian's expression was unreadable again, that mask of control sliding back into place. But Lena, the outcome doesn't change. One way or another, you're coming home. The only variable is whether you fight me or accept what's inevitable. Nothing's inevitable, she whispered. No? He smiled then, and it was sad and knowing and absolutely certain. I found you in a mid-sized city in Tennessee, using a fake name and paying cash for everything. I know what time you get up in the morning, what you eat for breakfast, that you hum old jazz songs when you think no one's listening. I know you're afraid of thunderstorms, and that you sleep on the left side of the bed, and that you cried the first time you felt her kick. Each detail was another nail in the coffin of her illusions. He'd been watching, not just protecting, watching, learning her, tracking every moment of her life like she was a case study, an asset to be managed. I know you, Lena, Adrian continued, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, maybe better than you know yourself. So yes, some things are inevitable, and this, us, together, raising our daughter, this was always inevitable. You can hate me for it if you need to, but you can't change it. He left then, pulling the door closed behind him with that same soft click, and Lena was alone again in the pre-dawn darkness with her daughter, and her terror and the crushing weight of impossible choices. She looked down at Isabella, who had slept through the entire encounter, oblivious to the way her existence had just irrevocably altered the course of her mother's life. "I'm sorry," Lena whispered, pressing her lips to Isabella's soft hair. "I'm so sorry, baby girl. I thought I could keep you safe. I thought I could give you a normal life." But normal was a luxury people like her, people connected to people like Adrian, didn't get. She'd known it 7 months ago when she'd run. She'd just been stupid enough to hope otherwise. The papers sat on the table, innocuous and damning. Lena reached for them with shaking hands, began to read by the dim light of the bedside monitor. Marriage license, prenuptial agreement. She laughed bitterly at that. What did she have that he could possibly want except the child they'd already created? Custody arrangement that granted him primary rights with generous visitation for her, unless she agreed to the marriage, in which case they'd share full custody. Financial settlement that made her head spin. Monthly allowance, trust fund for Isabella, property in her name. It was all there. A golden cage, beautifully appointed and absolutely inescapable. She read until the sun came up, until Patricia knocked softly and asked if she needed anything, until the morning shift nurse came to check her vitals and clucked sympathetically about the dark circles under her eyes. "Rough night, honey?" the nurse asked. Lena almost laughed. "You could say that." "Well, that beautiful baby of yours is sleeping like an angel. You should try to get some rest while she's down." But Lena couldn't sleep, could barely breathe, because in 3 hours, a car would arrive. In 3 hours, her time would be up. And she still didn't know what she was going to do. The choice should have been simple. Run. Take Isabella and disappear again, farther this time, somewhere Adrian couldn't find her. Canada, maybe. Mexico. Somewhere his reach didn't extend. But even as she thought it, she knew it was fantasy. He'd found her once. He'd find her again. And next time he might not be so patient. Next time he might just take what he wanted without offering her any choice at all. The alternative was just as impossible. Marry him. Return to Chicago, step into the world she'd fled, become the wife of a crime boss, raise her daughter surrounded by violence and corruption and blood money. Both choices were terrible. Both led to versions of the future that made her sick with dread. But only one kept her daughter safe. Only one ensured that Isabella would never want for anything, never face the kind of danger that had stalked Lena her entire life, never know what it was like to go to bed hungry or wake up afraid. At 8:45, Patricia came back with discharge papers and a wheelchair. "Ready to go home, Mama?" Lena looked down at Isabella, who just finished nursing and was making those small, snuffling sounds that newborns make when they're content. She thought about the studio apartment in Knoxville, the one she'd never see again. She thought about the diner where she'd worked, about Sarah and the other waitresses who'd become her friends. She thought about the life she'd been building, small and precarious, but hers. Then she thought about Adrian's eyes when he'd looked at their daughter. The crack in his armor, the raw need there. "Yeah," Lena said quietly, signing the papers with a hand that barely shook. "I'm ready." The nurse smiled. "Someone picking you up? You shouldn't drive after surgery." "Someone's coming." Lena's voice sounded distant to her own ears, like it was coming from underwater. "He should be here any minute." And he was. At precisely 9 a.m., as Lena was being wheeled through the hospital's main entrance, a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The back door opened and Adrian stepped out. He wasn't alone. A woman emerged from the passenger seat, older, elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and Adrian's same sharp cheekbones. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world, her designer coat swirling around her in the morning breeze. "Mama," Adrian said, and there was warning in his voice. The woman, his mother, Lena realized with a jolt, ignored him completely. She walked straight to Lena, looked down at Isabella, with an expression that was equal parts fierce and tender. "So," she said, her accent thick with Italian inflections. "This is my granddaughter." Lena clutched Isabella tighter. "Mrs. Russo." "Caterina," the woman corrected. "We're family now. No need for formalities." She reached out, and before Lena could stop her, she touched Isabella's cheek with one gentle finger. "Bella bambina." Beautiful, like her mother. Lena didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to navigate this moment, this surreal tableau of her old life crashing into her new one. "The car's ready," Adrian said quietly. "We should go." "Give her a moment," Caterina said sharply. "She just had surgery, Adrian. Have some consideration." For just a second, Lena saw Adrian's face do something complicated, annoyance and affection, and a kind of weary resignation that came from years of battling this woman and losing. "I'll help you into the car," he said to Lena, his voice softer now. "Take your time." Patricia had stepped back, giving them privacy, but Lena could feel her curious gaze, could feel the weight of judgment. Was this man good or bad, safe or dangerous? Should the nurse intervene? Lena stood slowly, wincing as the movement pulled at her incision. Adrian was there immediately, his hand under her elbow, supporting her weight with a gentleness that felt at odds with everything she knew about him. "Easy," he murmured. "I've got you." She wanted to pull away, wanted to refuse his help out of pure spite. But her body was weak and hurting, and Isabella was a solid weight in her arms, and the truth was she needed him right now. So she let him guide her to the car. Let Caterina fuss over Isabella, cooing in Italian. Let herself sink into the soft leather of the back seat, while Adrian carefully fastened a car seat. When had he gotten a car seat? And placed their daughter in it with hands that shook slightly. "Where are we going?" Lena asked as the car pulled away from the hospital. Adrian settled into the seat beside her, leaving careful space between them. "Airport. Private plane back to Chicago. I have a doctor on standby at the house to check you both over." "I haven't agreed to anything," Lena said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know." Adrian turned to look at her, and his expression was complicated. Part triumph, part relief, part something that looked almost like grief. "But you're here. You're in this car. That's enough for now." Caterina turned around from the front seat, her dark eyes, so like her son's, fixed on Lena with unsettling intensity. "You ran because you were afraid. That's understandable. But you're not running anymore, yes? For the baby's sake." It wasn't really a question, more like a command dressed up in maternal concern. "I don't know what I'm doing," Lena admitted, her exhaustion finally overwhelming her defenses. "I don't know how to do this." "You do what mothers have always done," Caterina said simply. "You protect your child. You give her the best life possible. Everything else," she waved a hand dismissively, "everything else we figure out." The ride to the airport took 20 minutes. Lena stared out the window, watching Knoxville slide past. The city she'd thought would be her sanctuary, the place where she'd planned to raise Isabella in anonymous safety. She'd been so naive, so stupid. The private plane was exactly what she'd expected, luxurious to the point of absurdity, all cream leather and polished wood. A flight attendant greeted them with professional courtesy, took one look at Isabella, and immediately produced blankets and pillows, creating a makeshift bassinet. "We'll be in Chicago in under 2 hours," Adrian said, settling into the seat across from Lena. "Try to rest." But Lena couldn't rest, could only watch Adrian watch their daughter, that expression of raw wonder never quite leaving his face. "You really didn't know?" she asked quietly, once the plane had leveled off, and Caterina had moved to the front to give them privacy. "Before I left. You didn't know I was pregnant?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "No. You disappeared so completely, so quickly. I thought maybe you'd found someone else. Thought maybe I'd misread what we had." His eyes met hers. "It took me 3 weeks to track you to Tennessee. Another week to confirm you were pregnant. By then, you were already settled, already building a life. I thought—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I thought maybe it was better to let you have those months. Let you prepare. Let you—" "Let me what?" "Realize you couldn't do it alone." The words were brutal in their honesty. I know how that sounds. But Lena, you were working 60-hour weeks at a diner, living in a building with no heat, eating one meal a day to save money. You think I didn't see? You think I didn't want to step in sooner? So you waited, Lena said slowly, understanding dawning. Until I was at my most vulnerable, until I'd just given birth, until I had no choice. Until you'd understand that I'm not the enemy. Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I love you. I've loved you since that first night when you told me my taste in wine was pretentious and my jokes were terrible. I loved you when you left. I loved you every day you were gone. And now, he looked at Isabella. Now I love her too. So yes, I waited. And yes, I'm giving you an ultimatum. But not because I want to control you, because I can't lose you, either of you. Lena felt something crack inside her chest, something she'd been keeping carefully frozen for 7 months. You can't just love away the things your family does, she whispered. You can't just ignore what you are. I'm not ignoring anything, Adrian said. I'm changing it. My father ran the business on fear and violence. I'm rebuilding it on loyalty and strategy. It'll take time, maybe years. But I'm not him, Lena. I'm not asking you to accept my father's empire. I'm asking you to help me build something different. It was a pretty speech, maybe even a sincere one. But Lena had heard pretty speeches before from dangerous men who promised to change. Still, when she looked at Isabella sleeping peacefully in her makeshift bed, when she thought about the alternative, running forever, always afraid, always one step ahead of discovery, she knew she'd already made her choice, had made it the moment she'd gotten in this car. One condition, she said. Adrian's eyes sharpened. Name it. I want to see it. All of it. The business, the operations, everything. No more secrets, no more lies. If I'm going to be part of this, I need to know exactly what I'm part of. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. Done. You'll have full transparency. I'll show you everything. And if I don't like what I see, Lena asked, if it's worse than I feared, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Adrian extended his hand across the narrow aisle. But you'll cross it with resources, with protection, with my name and everything that comes with it. Whatever you decide, Lena, you and Isabella will never be vulnerable again. That's my promise. Lena stared at his hand. It was a good hand, strong, scarred across the knuckles, capable of both violence and tenderness. The hand of a man who'd never backed down from anything in his life. She thought about her daughter, about the future she wanted for her versus the future she could actually provide, about love and safety and the impossible calculations mothers made every day. Then she reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, solid, unshakable. Okay, Lena breathed. Okay. And just like that, the woman who ran became the woman who stopped running, at least for now. The Russo estate sat 40 minutes outside Chicago, nestled in the kind of privacy that only extreme wealth could buy. As the car wound through iron gates and up a tree-lined drive, Lena pressed her face to the window, taking in the sprawling grounds that would now be her prison, or her sanctuary. She hadn't decided which yet. The house itself was a study in contradictions. Old-world Italian architecture married to modern security systems. Cameras discreetly positioned at every angle, guards in suits trying to look like gardeners and failing. Beautiful and deadly, just like the man who owned it. Isabella had woken during the descent into Chicago, fussing until Lena nursed her, and now she slept again with that boneless trust that newborns had. Complete faith that the world would keep her safe. Lena envied her that innocence. Home, Katerina announced as the car rolled to a stop before massive oak doors. Finally, my granddaughter comes home. The way she said it, my granddaughter, made Lena's spine stiffen. But before she could formulate a response, Adrian was opening her door, extending his hand to help her out. Careful, he murmured. The steps are uneven. She wanted to refuse his help again, but her body was still weak, still healing, and pride seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford. So she took his hand and let him guide her up the stone steps, through doors that swung open to reveal a foyer that could have housed her entire Knoxville apartment. Marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost more than a car, paintings on the walls that looked old and important and utterly intimidating. This was the world she'd run from, the life she'd rejected, and now she was standing in its heart, holding the baby who made escape impossible. Mrs. Russo. A woman appeared from a side hallway, 50s, kind-faced, wearing an apron that suggested she worked here. "Welcome home. I'm Maria, the housekeeper. Mr. Russo asked me to prepare the nursery and the primary suite." "The primary suite," Lena repeated, looking at Adrian. "Your room." "Our room," he corrected, "unless you'd prefer separate accommodations. I can arrange that." It was a test. Lena could feel it. Accept the shared room and acknowledge the intimacy he was claiming, or refuse and create distance that would only delay the inevitable. "Separate," she said, meeting his eyes. "For now." Something flickered across Adrian's face. Disappointment maybe, or frustration, but he nodded. "The West Wing has a suite with an adjoining nursery. Maria, have someone move the crib." "Already done, sir." Maria smiled at Lena, genuine warmth in her expression. "I took the liberty when Mr. Russo called ahead. Thought you might appreciate some space while you recover." Lena could have kissed her. Instead, she managed a tired smile. "Thank you. Thank you. Let me show you up." Maria gestured toward a sweeping staircase. "The doctor is waiting to examine you and the baby. Mr. Russo was very specific about making sure you both received immediate care." Of course he was. Adrian was nothing if not thorough, planning every detail with the same precision he probably used to plan whatever dark business kept the Russo empire running. The suite was beautiful. There was no denying that. Cream walls, soft lighting, a bed that looked like you could drown in it. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking gardens that stretched toward a distant tree line. The adjoining nursery had been decorated with obvious care. Soft blues and whites, a crib that looked antique and expensive, shelves already stocked with supplies Lena hadn't bought and couldn't have afforded. A middle-aged man stood by the window, medical bag in hand. He turned as they entered, offering a professional smile. "Mrs. Russo, I'm Dr. Soren. Mr. Russo has asked me to conduct a thorough examination." "It's Mitchell," Lena said automatically. "Lena Mitchell." "Lena Russo," Adrian corrected from the doorway. "Or will be, by the end of the week." Their eyes met across the room, and Lena saw the steel underneath his careful courtesy. He wasn't asking, wasn't negotiating. The wedding would happen whether she signed the papers willingly or not. "Let's just get this over with," Lena said, sinking onto the edge of the bed. Her incision was throbbing, and exhaustion was making her head swim. "Doctor." Soren was gentle and efficient, checking her vitals, examining the surgical site, asking questions about pain levels and bleeding. Then he turned his attention to Isabella, measuring and weighing her with practiced hands while making soft cooing sounds that seemed incongruous coming from a man who probably treated gunshot wounds as often as he delivered babies. "She's perfect," he announced finally. 7 pounds, 5 ounces now, she's already gaining weight. Good color, strong reflexes, no jaundice. "You're doing an excellent job, Mrs. He caught himself. "Miss Mitchell." "Thank you." Lena took Isabella back, cradling her protectively. "As for you," Dr. Soren continued, turning back to Lena, "the incision is healing well, but you need rest, real rest. No lifting anything heavier than the baby, no strenuous activity for at least 6 weeks. I'll leave pain medication and instructions with Maria. If you experience fever, increased bleeding, or any concerning symptoms, call me immediately." He handed Adrian a card, and Lena noticed the way Adrian studied it, committing the number to memory with that same intense focus he brought to everything. "I'll be checking in daily for the first week," Dr. Soren added. "After that, weekly until you're fully healed." Daily. Because of course Adrian would arrange for daily medical supervision. Nothing left to chance, nothing outside his control. When the doctor left, Maria tactfully disappeared as well, leaving Lena and Adrian alone for the first time since the hospital. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. "You don't have to do this," Lena said finally. "Force me to marry you. You could just, I don't know, be a father without making me your wife." "I could," Adrian agreed, moving to lean against the doorframe. "But I won't. Isabella deserves my name. You deserve my protection. And I deserve—" He stopped, something raw crossing his face. "I deserve a chance to prove I'm not the monster you think I am. You had a man killed for hitting me with his car. He was driving drunk. He could have killed you, killed our daughter before she was born." Adrian's voice was flat, matter of fact. "He made a choice. I made a different one. The world is better without him. That's not justice, Adrian. That's revenge. Justice is what people with lawyers and judges call it when they want to feel civilized. Adrian pushed off the door frame, moving closer. I don't have that luxury. I can't wait for courts and appeals while threats multiply. I see danger, I eliminate it. That's how I kept you alive. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to. He was close enough now that Lena could smell his cologne, see the shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as she had. The moment you got pregnant with my child, you became mine to protect, whether you wanted it or not. I'm not property, Lena said, but her voice lacked heat. She was too tired to fight, too overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. No, Adrian agreed softly. Your family, that's worse. Property I could sell or abandon. Family. His hand came up, fingers ghosting along her cheek with a gentleness that made her breath catch. Family. I'd kill for, die for, burn the whole world down for. Lena should pull away, should maintain the distance she'd been trying so hard to create. But his touch was warm and familiar, and part of her, the part that had loved him before fear won, wanted to lean into it. I need to sleep, she said instead, turning away. Can you take her? Just for a few hours? If Adrian was surprised by the request, he didn't show it. Of course. Maria prepared bottles in case. I pumped on the plane. There should be enough. Lena handed Isabella over, watched the way Adrian's entire body shifted to accommodate the tiny weight, the way his expression softened into something almost vulnerable. You know how to... I read every book published on newborn care in the last 5 years, Adrian said dryly. I think I can manage a few hours. Of course he could. Of course he'd studied and prepared, approaching fatherhood with the same ruthless efficiency he brought to everything else. Lena watched them for a moment. This powerful, dangerous man holding their impossibly small daughter with hands that had probably broken bones and ended lives. The contrast should have terrified her. Instead, it made something in her chest ache. Go, Adrian said gently, reading her exhaustion. Rest. We'll be fine. So she did. She kicked off her shoes, crawled under covers that felt like clouds, and let unconsciousness take her before she could think too hard about where she was or what she'd agreed to. She woke to darkness and the sound of voices, low, intense, speaking rapid Italian. For a disoriented moment, Lena couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came crashing back. Chicago, the Russo estate. Adrian. The conversation was coming from the nursery. Lena slipped out of bed, wincing as the movement pulled at her incision, and moved quietly to the connecting door. Through the crack, she could see Adrian standing by the crib, Isabella in his arms. Katerina sat in a nearby rocking chair, and they were arguing in tense whispers that carried clearly in the quiet. You cannot simply force her to marry you, Katerina was saying in Italian, her accent thick. She will resent you. She will make you miserable. She'll be safe, Adrian countered in the same language. She'll be protected. That's what matters. And what about love? What about trust? You think those things can be commanded? I think they can be earned. Adrian's voice was quieter now, almost vulnerable. I have time. She's here. That's a start. She's here because you gave her no choice. Katerina stood, moving to her son. Adriano, my darling boy, I know you love her, but love that comes from fear is not love at all. Then what would you have me do? Adrian's frustration was clear even in whispered Italian. Let her go? Let her take my daughter and disappear again? Spend the rest of my life wondering if they're safe? I would have you be patient. I would have you court her properly, earn her trust, show her that the man she loved is still there underneath the weight of your father's legacy. My father's legacy is the only reason she ran in the first place. Then change it. Katerina's voice turned fierce. You are not Dominic. You never were. Stop trying to be him. I'm not. You are. You use his methods, his intimidation, his need to control everything and everyone. Katerina touched Adrian's face with maternal tenderness. But you have his heart too, the good parts he buried, the parts that loved me enough to let me leave when I needed to. The parts that understood family was more than power. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, gently rocking Isabella. She thinks I'm a monster. Then prove her wrong. Katerina kissed his cheek. Not with force, not with threats, with patience, with truth, with the man I raised you to be. She left then, and Adrian stood alone with their daughter, still swaying in that unconscious rhythm that soothed babies. Lena watched him through the crack in the door, seeing something she hadn't expected: uncertainty. Fear. The same doubt she carried, reflected in his posture. Finally, he laid Isabella in her crib, tucking blankets around her with careful hands. Then he turned toward Lena's room, and she barely had time to slip back into bed before he was opening the door. "I know you're awake," Adrian said softly, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. "You were listening." "No point denying it. Your Italian is rusty. You mixed up the subjunctive tense twice." He actually laughed, a small, surprised sound. "So you understood." "Most of it." Lena sat up, pulling the covers around her. "Your mother thinks you're making a mistake." "My mother thinks I'm repeating my father's mistakes," Adrian corrected. "She's not wrong." "So change," Lena heard herself echo Katerina's words. "You keep saying you're different from him. Prove it." "How?" Adrian's voice was raw. "How do I prove that when everything I've done, following you, controlling you, threatening you, comes from the same place his worst impulses did? Fear of loss. Need for control. You could start by actually giving me a choice." Lena met his eyes in the darkness. Not a fake choice between compliance and worse compliance. A real one. "And if your choice is to leave," Adrian's jaw tightened, "if you take Isabella and walk out tomorrow, then you let us go." Lena said it knowing it was impossible, knowing he'd never agree. "You trust that I'll keep her safe. You trust that maybe, someday, I'll come back on my own terms." The silence stretched between them, thick with impossibility. "I can't," Adrian finally said, and there was genuine anguish in his voice. "I can't watch you walk away again, Lena. I can't spend another 7 months not knowing if you're safe, if you need something, if some threat I haven't anticipated is closing in. I can't—" His voice broke slightly. "I can't lose you, either of you. So instead you'll cage us." Lena's voice was sad rather than angry. "You'll build beautiful prisons and call it protection." "Yes." Adrian's honesty was brutal. "If that's what it takes, yes. I'd rather have you hate me and alive than love my memory and dead." "That's not love, Adrian. That's obsession." "Then I'm obsessed." He stood, moving toward the door. "I'm obsessed with keeping you breathing. Obsessed with making sure Isabella grows up safe. Obsessed with the woman I fell in love with 2 years ago and never stopped loving, even when she vanished like smoke." He paused at the threshold, his back to her. "The wedding is in 4 days. You can walk down that aisle willingly, or I'll carry you. But it's happening, Lena. Make your peace with that however you need to." Then he was gone, and Lena was alone with her thoughts and the soft sounds of Isabella sleeping in the next room. 4 days. That's all the time she had to figure out if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the only choice that made sense. The next morning arrived with gentle knocking and Maria entering with a breakfast tray. "Good morning. I thought you might prefer to eat in your room while you recover." The food was simple but perfect. Scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, bread that was still warm. Lena ate mechanically, her mind spinning through possibilities and finding no good ones. After breakfast, Maria helped her shower, a humiliating necessity given her surgical restrictions, and provided soft clothes that had clearly been purchased specifically for her. Everything fit perfectly, which meant Adrian had been watching long enough to know her size. "Mr. Russo asked me to let you know he's in his office," Maria said as she helped Lena back to bed. "He wanted to speak with you when you were ready." "And if I'm never ready?" Maria's smile was knowing. "Then I suspect he'll come to you. He's not a patient man, our Mr. Russo." "You've worked for the family long?" 20 years. Maria straightened the bed covers. "Since before Adrian was in charge. I've seen a lot of changes in this house." "Good changes?" Lena asked, genuinely curious. Maria considered the question carefully. "Different changes. Dominic, Mr. Russo Sr., he ruled through fear. Staff left regularly. The house felt—" She paused, choosing words. "Cold. Adrian is demanding, yes, but fair. He pays well, treats people with respect. The atmosphere is different now." "But the business is not my concern," Maria said firmly. "I cook and clean and care for this house. What happens outside these walls, I don't ask. But I can tell you this, Adrian would die before letting harm come to you or that baby. Some men, that would be a threat. With him, it's a promise. She left Lena to consider that distinction. By afternoon, Lena had fed Isabella twice and managed to walk to the balcony without feeling like she might pass out. The gardens below were extensive, manicured to perfection, with paths winding through sculpted hedges and flower beds that wouldn't bloom for months. A knock at her door revealed not Maria, but Katerina, carrying what looked like a wedding magazine. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the sitting area near the balcony. Lena almost said no, but curiosity, or maybe just the need for female company that wasn't paid staff, made her nod. Katerina settled into a chair with practiced grace, setting the magazine aside. "So, you are angry with my son. Shouldn't I be?" "Absolutely. He has handled this terribly." Katerina's bluntness was surprising. He is like his father in that way, so focused on the outcome, he forgets people are not chess pieces to be moved. "Then why are you here helping him plan a wedding I don't want?" "Because whether you want it or not, it is happening. And if it must happen, it should at least be beautiful." Katerina opened the magazine. "Also because I think you are not being entirely honest with yourself." Lena bristled. "About what?" "About what you want. What you feel." Katerina's dark eyes were knowing. "You loved my son once. Maybe you still do. But you are so busy being angry, rightfully, that you cannot see past it to what is also true." "And what's that?" "That he loves you. Desperately. Stupidly. In all the wrong ways and some of the right ones." Katerina leaned forward. "I am not excusing his behavior. I told him last night he is making mistakes. But I also know my son, and I know that if you give him a chance, he will spend the rest of his life trying to earn your forgiveness." "I don't want his guilt," Lena said. "I want my freedom." "Freedom to do what? Work in a diner? Live in poverty? Raise Isabella alone while looking over your shoulder?" Katerina's voice was gentle but relentless. "You are a smart woman, Lena. You know that is not freedom. That is survival. And survival is exhausting." Lena wanted to argue, but the truth was she was exhausted, had been exhausted for 7 months. The constant fear, the endless calculation of risk, the weight of responsibility for another life, it had been crushing her slowly. "He showed up in my hospital room," Lena said quietly. 12 hours after I gave birth. Told me he'd been watching me for months. Gave me ultimatums when I could barely stand. You call that love?" "I call that fear," Katerina corrected. "The same fear you felt when you ran. You were both afraid of each other, of the future, of failing to protect what you love. Fear makes us cruel, even when we mean to be kind." She pulled out a series of photos from the magazine, elegant dresses, simple flower arrangements. "So here's my proposal. We plan a wedding. You choose everything: dress, flowers, music, guests. You make it yours. And in 4 days you walk down an aisle and marry my son." "And then what?" "Then you see." Katerina's smile was small but sincere. "You see if the man who found you across 3 states and never stopped protecting you is worth the risk. You see if love can grow from complicated beginnings. You see if family, messy, imperfect, built on mistakes and second chances, is stronger than the freedom of being alone." It was a pretty speech. Lena wondered if Katerina had been practicing it. "I need to see him," Lena said abruptly. "Adrian, I need to talk to him about what happens after the wedding." "Of course." Katerina stood gracefully. "I will send him up." "But Lena?" She paused at the door. "Remember, he is afraid too. Men just hide it differently." 20 minutes later, Adrian knocked softly before entering. He looked tired, Lena realized. Lines of stress around his eyes, shadows underneath that suggested he hadn't slept. "You wanted to see me." "Your mother said I could choose everything about the wedding." Lena watched his face carefully. "Is that true? Or is it just another manipulation?" "It's true." Adrian moved to the chair Katerina had vacated. "Whatever you want, guest list, venue, everything. I want it here. Small. Just family, your family, since I don't have any." Something flickered across Adrian's expression. "Your brother is probably better off thinking I'm dead," Lena interrupted. "Marcus was after him too. If he knows I'm alive, it puts him at risk." "Marcus is dead," Adrian said flatly. "Has been for 5 months. Your brother is safe." Lena absorbed this. Another person dead because of her connection to Adrian. She should feel horror. Instead, she just felt tired. After the wedding, she said, you promised me transparency. I want to see the business, all of it. Adrian's jaw tightened. Lena, you said no more secrets. You said you'd show me everything. She leaned forward, despite the pull on her incision. Were you lying? No, but some things, you don't need to see them. They'll give you nightmares. I've had nightmares for 7 months. Show me anyway. They stared at each other for a long moment, wills locked. Finally, Adrian nodded. After the wedding, I'll show you everything. But Lena, once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's no going back to comfortable ignorance. I stopped being comfortable the moment I realized I was pregnant with a crime boss's baby. Lena's smile was bitter. Show me the monster I'm marrying. Let me make an informed choice about whether to stay. You won't be allowed to leave. Adrian's voice was quiet but absolutely firm. I need you to understand that. You can see everything, know everything, hate everything. But you and Isabella will stay here, under my protection, forever. Then it's not really a choice, is it? No, Adrian agreed. It's not. But it's the best I can offer. Lena thought about his mother's words, about fear and love and the complicated space between them, about Isabella sleeping peacefully in the next room, oblivious to the negotiations happening over her future. Okay, she finally said, show me. After the wedding, show me who you really are. And then we'll see if this marriage is a beginning or just a very expensive prison sentence. Adrian stood, and for a moment she thought he might touch her, might close the distance between them. Instead, he just nodded. 4 days, Lena, and then no more running, for either of us. He left her alone with that promise, and Lena wondered if she'd just made a deal with the devil or finally stopped fighting the inevitable. The next 4 days passed in a blur of wedding preparations that felt surreal. Katerina was true to her word. Lena chose everything. A simple ivory dress that could be worn while still recovering from surgery. White roses, because anything more elaborate felt like a mockery. A ceremony in the estate's private chapel with just Katerina Maria and 2 of Adrian's most trusted men as witnesses. No bridesmaids, no elaborate reception, just vows that would bind her legally to a man she barely knew anymore, if she ever had. Adrian gave her space, appearing only to ask questions or sign documents, but Lena would catch glimpses of him with Isabella, holding her, talking to her in soft Italian, his entire face transforming into something gentle and unguarded. Those moments made her chest ache with complicated emotions she refused to name. On the morning of the wedding, Maria helped her dress while Isabella watched from her bassinet, those slate blue eyes tracking movement with increasing alertness. You look beautiful, Maria said, fastening the last button. Lena looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was simple but elegant, accommodating her still healing body while making her look less like a prisoner and more like a bride. Her dark hair was loose, the way Adrian had always preferred it. I look like I'm going to my execution, Lena muttered, or to your future. Maria's smile was knowing. Sometimes they're the same thing. The chapel was small and old, clearly original to the estate. Afternoon light filtered through stained glass, casting colored shadows across stone floors. Katerina sat in the front pew, holding Isabella, whose dark hair had been tamed into soft curls. And at the altar stood Adrian, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Lena's car, looking at her with an expression that was part triumph, part terror, and entirely overwhelming. No music played, no traditional processional. Lena just walked down the short aisle, her surgical incision pulling with each step, until she stood beside the man who'd hunted her across 3 states and was now about to become her husband. The ceremony was brief. Simple vows that felt anything but simple. Adrian's hand shook slightly when he slid the ring onto her finger, a band of diamonds that caught the light and sparkled like shackles. I do, Lena heard herself say, and meant it, and regretted it, and wondered if she'd ever stop feeling both simultaneously. I do, Adrian repeated, his voice steady and sure. The priest, an old man who'd probably married Dominic and Katerina decades ago, smiled. You may kiss your bride. Adrian's hand came up to cup her face, and Lena saw something complicated in his eyes, permission being asked even now. So she nodded, just slightly, and let him kiss her. It was gentle, reverent, nothing like the passionate, desperate kisses they'd shared 2 years ago when everything was new and possibility felt infinite. This was a promise and a warning and a question all at once. When they broke apart, Lena was shaking. "Mrs. Russo," Adrian said softly, and it sounded like a prayer. Lena looked past him to where Katerina sat holding Isabella, to the chapel's stone walls, to the life she'd just committed to with words she couldn't take back. "Show me," she said. "Tonight. Show me everything you promised." Adrian's expression shifted, surprise and wariness and something that might have been respect. "Tonight," he agreed. And Lena realized that the wedding was just the beginning. The real test, the real choice, was still ahead. The wedding dinner was intimate and strange. Katerina making toasts in Italian that sounded both celebratory and mournful. Maria serving courses that Lena barely tasted. Adrian watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Isabella slept through most of it, oblivious to the fact that her parents had just legally bound themselves together in a ceremony that felt more like a business merger than a marriage. When the meal finally ended, Katerina kissed Lena's cheek and whispered, "Be patient with him, and with yourself." Then she took Isabella upstairs, leaving the newlyweds alone in the dining room with its heavy furniture and oppressive silence. Adrian stood, extending his hand. "Come with me." Lena looked at that outstretched hand, the same hand that had slid a ring onto her finger an hour ago, that had signed documents giving him legal claim to her and their daughter. She thought about refusing, but curiosity and the need to finally understand what she'd married into made her take it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid, and he led her through corridors she hadn't yet explored. The house was a maze of rooms and hallways, each turn revealing new evidence of wealth that made her old life feel impossibly distant. Finally, they reached a door that looked different from the others. Reinforced steel disguised as wood, with a keypad lock that Adrian shielded as he entered a code. "My office," he said, pushing it open. "The heart of everything I control." The room beyond was surprisingly sparse. A massive desk dominated one wall, multiple monitors arranged across its surface. Filing cabinets lined another wall, each drawer labeled with codes Lena didn't understand. The third wall was entirely glass, overlooking the estate's grounds and the city lights of Chicago glowing in the distance. Adrian moved to the desk, began pulling files from drawers with methodical precision. "You wanted transparency. Here it is." He spread documents across the desk's surface, financial records, shipping manifests, property deeds, names and numbers that meant nothing to Lena, but clearly represented something significant to Adrian's operation. "Start here," he said, pointing to a ledger. "This tracks our legitimate businesses, restaurants, construction companies, waste management, all legal, all profitable, all providing cover and income for the family." Lena moved closer, scanning the numbers. The amounts were staggering, millions of dollars flowing through companies she'd never heard of, creating a network so complex it would take forensic accountants years to untangle. "And the illegitimate businesses?" she asked. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he pulled out another set of files. "Here, gambling operations. We control most of the underground betting in the greater Chicago area. Protection services for businesses that prefer our security to police intervention. Import-export operations that sometimes involve goods that aren't strictly legal." "Drugs?" Lena's voice was flat. "No." Adrian's response was immediate and firm. "My father dealt in narcotics. I shut that down the day I took over. Too volatile, too many innocent casualties. I won't profit from addiction." "How noble," Lena said, unable to keep the sarcasm from her voice. "You only profit from gambling addiction and extortion. The businesses we protect pay willingly. We provide a service, security, dispute resolution, insurance against competitors who play dirty." Adrian's tone was defensive now. "And the gambling is recreational, adults making choices. Adults you probably encourage to make bad choices." "Yes." His honesty was brutal. "I'm not claiming moral high ground, Lena. You wanted to see what I am. This is it. I run an empire built on vice and violence, kept in check by reputation and ruthlessness. I hurt people who threaten what's mine. I eliminate problems permanently. I use fear as currency." He pulled out another file, this one thinner. Inside were photographs, surveillance shots of men Lena didn't recognize. Adrian's finger tapped each image in turn. "Marcus Delgado, found you in October. My men intercepted him, convinced him to leave town. He didn't listen. 3 weeks later, he came back. So I made him disappear." Adrian's voice was emotionless, reciting facts. "The drunk driver from November. He's in a facility upstate, permanently disabled after his car mysteriously went off a bridge. He survived, but he'll never drive again. Vincent Russo, my uncle. He tried to take control after my father died, wanted to restart the drug operations. I had him committed to a psychiatric facility in Italy. He'll spend the rest of his life there. Each revelation hit Lena like a physical blow. She'd known, intellectually, what Adrian was capable of, but hearing it laid out so clinically made it real in a way her imagination hadn't prepared her for. The sex offender in your building, Adrian continued relentlessly. He resisted eviction, had an unfortunate accident involving a baseball bat and 3 broken ribs. Suddenly he was very cooperative about relocating. Stop, Lena whispered. No. Adrian's eyes were hard. You wanted this. You demanded transparency. So here it is, Lena. Every ugly truth, every violent solution, every line I've crossed to keep you safe. He pulled out more files, spreading them across the desk like evidence in a trial. Here's the money I funneled to your clinic. Here's the donation I made to the hospital where Isabella was born, enough to keep their maternity ward running for 5 years. Here's the trust fund I established for her the day I confirmed you were pregnant. $20 million that will be hers when she turns 18, untouchable by anyone, including me. Lena stared at the documents, her mind reeling. $20 million. For a daughter he'd never met until 3 days ago. For a child whose mother had run from him and hidden for 7 months. Why? The question came out broken. Why go to these lengths? Because she's mine. Adrian's voice was raw now, the careful control cracking. Because you're mine. Because when I love something, I protect it with everything I have. Even if that protection looks like control. Even if it makes you hate me. He moved around the desk, closing the distance between them until Lena could feel the heat of him, smell the cedar and bergamot that she'd never been able to forget. I've killed for you, Adrian said quietly. I've bribed judges, blackmailed officials, destroyed lives. I've committed crimes that would put me away for multiple lifetimes. And I'd do it all again without hesitation if it meant keeping you and Isabella safe. That's not love, Lena said, but her voice wavered. That's obsession, possession. Maybe. Adrian's hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything he'd just confessed. But it's all I know how to give. My father taught me that love is weakness unless you fortify it with power. My mother taught me that power without love is empty. So I tried to combine them, power in service of love, protection as proof of devotion. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and Lena hated how much she wanted to lean into that touch, hated how her body remembered loving him, even as her mind cataloged all the reasons she should run. I can't be what you need me to be, she said. I can't just accept this and play the Mafia wife, smiling at dinners while you order executions. I'm not asking you to. Adrian's forehead came to rest against hers, and Lena could feel him trembling slightly. I'm asking you to see me, all of me. The violence and the devotion, the cruelty and the care, and then decide if you can live with it. I don't have a choice, Lena reminded him bitterly. You made sure of that. You have more choice than you think. Adrian pulled back, his dark eyes searching hers. You can retreat into that suite upstairs and treat this as a transaction, safety for Isabella in exchange for your presence. You can maintain walls between us forever. I won't force intimacy beyond what the law requires. Or, Lena asked, because there was clearly an alternative he was offering. Or you can partner with me. Adrian's voice dropped lower. Really partner with me. See the business, understand it, help me transform it into something less toxic. My mother was right. I've been using my father's methods because they're what I know. But you could show me different ones. You could help me build something better. Lena laughed, the sound harsh and disbelieving. I'm supposed to redeem you? Reform the crime boss through the power of love? No. Adrian's response was sharp. I'm not asking for redemption. I'm asking for partnership. You're smart, Lena. You survived 7 months on your own with nothing but determination and cunning. You see angles I miss, possibilities I'm too jaded to imagine. Work with me. Help me transition the family businesses into legitimate enterprises. It'll take years, maybe decades, but it's possible. And in the meantime, Lena challenged, while we're slowly going legitimate, you still hurt people, still use violence to solve problems. Yes, Adrian didn't flinch from the truth. I won't lie to you. There will be blood on my hands for a long time, but there could be less of it. There could be purpose to it beyond just maintaining power. Protection instead of expansion. Defense instead of aggression. He was offering her a role, Lena realized, not just as his wife and Isabella's mother, but as someone with actual influence. It was manipulative and calculated and probably another trap, but it was also more honest than anything else he'd given her. I need to think, she said finally. This is too much, too fast. Take all the time you need. Adrian stepped back, giving her space. The office is yours whenever you want it. All the files, all the information. Nothing is hidden anymore. Lena looked around the room at the evidence of an empire built on calculated violence and careful planning. This was her husband's kingdom, and whether she liked it or not, it was now hers too. There's something else, Adrian said, moving to one of the monitors. Something I need to show you before you make any decisions. He pulled up security footage, multiple camera angles showing the estate's perimeter. Lena watched as the timestamp rolled back several hours to just before dawn. On screen, a dark SUV pulled up to the estate's outer gates. Two men got out, began examining the fence line. Who are they? Lena asked. Soldiers for the Moretti family. They've been testing our defenses for the last week. Adrian's voice was grim. Antonio Moretti thinks my father's death left a power vacuum. He's planning to move on our territory, take over our operations. Lena's blood ran cold. They know about me? About Isabella? Not yet. But they will soon. Adrian pulled up more footage. The same men in different locations, photographing the house, watching the gates. This is the world we live in, Lena. This is why I can't let you leave, can't let you be vulnerable. The moment word gets out that I have a wife and child, you become leverage, targets. So what are you going to do? Lena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. I'm going to end the threat before it becomes one. Adrian's expression was cold, calculating. Moretti has been expanding too aggressively, making enemies. I'll use those enemies against him, form alliances that isolate him, and when he's weak enough, I'll eliminate the problem permanently. You mean kill him? I mean remove him from the board. Adrian's distinction was minimal but apparently important to him. Whether that means death, imprisonment, or exile depends on how cooperative he chooses to be. Lena sank into the chair behind Adrian's desk, suddenly exhausted. This was her life now. Constant threats, calculated violence, enemies circling like sharks. And Isabella would grow up in the middle of it, protected but never truly safe. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't live like this, always afraid, always waiting for the next threat. You've been living like that for 7 months, Adrian pointed out. At least here you have resources, security, me. He knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. I know I'm asking too much. I know this isn't the life you wanted, but it's the life we have. And we can make it bearable, or we can make it hell. That choice is ours. Lena looked down at their joined hands, her small and scarred from years of service work, his larger and marked with violence. They were wrong for each other in every conceivable way. Different worlds, different values, different ideas about what love should look like. But they'd created Isabella together, and that tiny, perfect life sleeping upstairs changed all the calculations. I want to see her, Lena said abruptly. Our daughter. I need to hold her. Adrian stood immediately, helping her up with careful hands. Of course. They walked back through the maze of corridors in silence, Lena's mind churning through everything she'd learned. By the time they reached the nursery, she felt like she might shatter from the weight of it all. Katerina was in the rocking chair, Isabella asleep against her shoulder. She looked up as they entered, her expression knowing. She just fell asleep, Katerina whispered, but I think she needs her mother. Lena took Isabella carefully, cradling her close and breathing in that perfect newborn smell. This was real. This was worth protecting, even if the protection came wrapped in violence and control. Leave us, Adrian said quietly to his mother. Please. Katerina nodded, kissing Isabella's head before slipping out. The door closed, leaving Lena and Adrian alone with their daughter in the soft glow of the nursery's nightlight. I used to imagine this, Adrian said softly, moving to stand beside Lena. Before you left, I'd picture coming home to find you with our child. Never thought it would happen like this. How did you think it would happen? Lena asked, still looking down at Isabella. I thought I'd have time. Time to prove I could be different from my father. Time to build something legitimate before bringing a family into it. Time to earn your trust instead of demanding it. Adrian's voice was rough with regret. But you ran. And I ran out of time. So here we are. Here we are, Lena echoed. She looked up at him, studying his face in the dim light. If I do this, if I try to partner with you, I need something in return. Name it. Power. The word felt dangerous on her tongue. Real power, not just the illusion of it. I want a voice in decisions that affect us. I want access to information. I want you to actually listen when I tell you something is wrong. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, then, done. But Lena, power comes with responsibility. If you're making decisions with me, you own the consequences of those decisions. You can't claim innocence if things go wrong. I stopped being innocent the day I fell in love with you, Lena said. I'll own my choices. Can you say the same? Yes. Adrian's answer was immediate. Every choice I've made has been deliberate. Every consequence is mine to carry. Lena shifted Isabella to one arm, using her free hand to touch Adrian's face. He went very still, like he was afraid any movement might make her pull away. I don't forgive you, she said clearly, for stalking me, for threatening me, for forcing this marriage. I don't forgive any of it. I understand. But I'm willing to try. The words felt like stepping off a cliff. I'm willing to see if we can build something real from this disaster. For her sake, and maybe... She paused, struggling with honesty. Maybe for ours too. Adrian's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, there was something raw and vulnerable there that made Lena's chest ache. Thank you, that's more than I deserve. Way more, Lena agreed. So don't waste it. He pulled her close then, careful of Isabella between them, and rested his forehead against hers. They stood like that for a long time, three people bound together by biology and choice and the complicated mess that people called family. Finally, Lena pulled back. I'm exhausted, and I need to feed her soon. I'll help you to your room. Adrian's hands were gentle as he guided her toward the door. Our room, Lena corrected quietly. If we're doing this, really doing this, I can't hide in a separate wing. It sends the wrong message. Adrian stopped, looking at her with surprise and something that might have been hope. You're sure? No. Lena's laugh was shaky. I'm not sure about anything, but I'm tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of making decisions from a place of terror. So I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing to build something instead of hiding from everything. Okay. Adrian's voice was thick with emotion. Okay. They walked to what Lena now understood was their shared suite, larger than her entire Knoxville apartment, decorated with obvious care for her comfort. Adrian had Maria bring up the bassinet while Lena changed into nightclothes, her hands shaking slightly as she processed what she'd just agreed to. When she emerged from the bathroom, Adrian was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He'd removed his jacket and tie, rolled up his sleeves, and Lena could see the tension in his shoulders. You can breathe, she said dryly. I'm not going to bolt in the middle of the night. He turned, offering a small smile. Force of habit. I spent 7 months waiting for you to vanish. I'm not vanishing, but I need you to understand something. Lena moved closer, Isabella still in her arms. I'm staying because it's the smart choice for our daughter, because I think maybe we can build something worth having. But if you ever lie to me again, if you ever hide things, or manipulate me, or treat me like property instead of a partner, I will find a way to leave. And next time, you won't find me. It was an empty threat, and they both knew it. But Adrian nodded seriously, treating it with the respect it deserved. No more lies, no more manipulation. We do this as partners or not at all. Partners, Lena agreed. Even when we disagree, even when it's hard. Especially then, Adrian said. Isabella chose that moment to wake, making the small fussing sounds that meant she was hungry. Lena settled into the chair by the window, preparing to nurse while Adrian watched with that same expression of wonder he'd worn since first seeing his daughter. Can I ask you something? Lena said as Isabella latched on. When did you know about the pregnancy? October 15th. Adrian's answer was immediate, like he'd been waiting for this question. My people tracked you to the clinic. They reported you'd had an appointment, left with prenatal vitamins. I flew to Knoxville that night, planning to confront you, but when I got there, saw you through your apartment window. He stopped, swallowed hard. You looked happy. Scared, but happy. And I realized that if I showed up, I'd take that away from you. So I stayed away, protected you from a distance. Told myself I was giving you time to come to terms with it. But really, you were afraid I'd disappear if you pushed too hard, Lena guessed. Yeah. Adrian's smile was rueful. I was afraid. Have been afraid every day since you left. Afraid of losing you, losing her, losing any chance at the future I wanted. What future did you want? Lena asked quietly. Adrian moved to sit on the edge of the bed, close enough to talk without disturbing Isabella's feeding. Something normal, or as normal as someone like me can have. Coming home to you, helping with homework, family dinners, teaching our daughter to ride a bike and scaring off her first boyfriend and walking her down the aisle someday. He laughed softly. Stupid domestic dreams for a man who makes his living through violence. Not stupid, Lena said, surprising herself with the gentleness in her voice. Human. Everyone wants those things, Adrian, even criminals. Even monsters? His tone was light, but the question was serious. Lena looked at him, really looked, saw the man who'd terrified her and the man who'd protected her, the ruthless crime boss and the gentle father, the calculating manipulator and the vulnerable human asking if he could be loved. You're not a monster, she said finally. You're just a man who makes monstrous choices sometimes. There's a difference. Is there? Adrian's dark eyes searched hers. Yeah. Lena shifted Isabella to her other breast, wincing slightly at the pull on her incision. Monsters don't ask questions like that. They don't care if they're causing harm. You care. You just prioritize different things than most people. I prioritize you. Adrian's voice dropped lower. You and Isabella. Everything else is secondary. That's part of the problem, Lena pointed out. The world doesn't work that way. You can't just decide two people matter and everyone else is expendable. Watch me. The words were half joking, half deadly serious. Lena sighed. This was going to be the work, helping him see beyond the narrow focus that had kept him alive in his world but made him dangerous in hers. Teaching him that protection didn't have to mean control, that love didn't require possession. But as she watched him watch their daughter, as she felt the exhaustion of the day catching up with her, Lena thought maybe it was possible. Maybe this man who'd crossed lines and broken laws and hunted her across 3 states could learn different ways of loving, different ways of protecting. Maybe they could teach each other. I need to sleep, she said once Isabella had finished eating. Can you take her? Adrian moved immediately, accepting their daughter with practiced ease now. He'd gotten comfortable holding her over the last few days, Lena realized. Confident in a way that suggested he'd been studying, practicing, preparing for fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else. Lena watched him settle Isabella into the bassinet beside the bed, tucking blankets around her with gentle hands. Then he straightened, began unbuttoning his shirt. What are you doing? Lena asked, her heart suddenly pounding. Getting ready for bed. Adrian paused, reading her tension. I'm not expecting anything, Lena. You're still recovering from surgery. I'll sleep on top of the covers if it makes you more comfortable. It should have. But the truth was, some part of Lena wanted him close, wanted the warmth and solidity of him, the illusion of safety his presence created. No, she said quietly. Under the covers is fine. Just stay on your side. Adrian's smile was small but genuine. I can do that. They settled into bed with careful distance between them, Isabella's soft breathing the only sound in the darkened room. Lena lay staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of Adrian beside her, of the heat of him and the sound of his breathing, and the impossible intimacy of sharing a bed with someone who'd been both stranger and obsession. Lena? Adrian's voice was quiet in the darkness. Yeah? Thank you. For trying, for staying, for giving me a chance I don't deserve. But Lena thought about all the responses she could give. Bitter ones, honest ones, deflecting ones. Instead, she reached across the space between them and found his hand in the darkness. Don't thank me yet, she said. We haven't figured out if this works. Adrian's fingers threaded through hers, holding on like she might disappear if he let go. But we're going to try. Yeah, Lena agreed, her eyes finally closing. We're going to try. She fell asleep like that, hand in hand with the man who'd destroyed her illusions and demanded her surrender, and now, somehow, represented her best chance at a future worth having. When she woke in the early morning hours to Isabella's crying, Adrian was already up, changing their daughter's diaper with fumbling but earnest hands. Lena watched him from the bed. This powerful man brought low by a baby's needs, and felt something shift in her chest. Maybe love didn't have to be pure to be real. Maybe it could be complicated and messy and built on questionable foundations and still grow into something worth keeping. Maybe fortress and prison weren't so different if you had the keys. Adrian looked up, caught her watching, and smiled, uncertain and hopeful and entirely human. "Go back to sleep," he said softly. "I've got her." And for the first time since arriving at the Russo estate, Lena did. She closed her eyes and let herself trust that when she woke again, they'd both still be there. That was something. It wasn't everything, wasn't enough to erase the fear or the anger or the complicated grief for the life she'd imagined. But it was a start. The morning after her tentative truce with Adrian, Lena woke to find him already gone from their bed. Isabella was still sleeping in her bassinet, tiny fists curled near her face, and for a moment Lena just watched her daughter breathe, marveling at the impossible fact of her existence. She found a note on Adrian's pillow, his handwriting precise and controlled even in this small intimacy. "Meeting with the Moretti situation. Back by noon. Call if you need anything. The number's in your phone." Her phone. Lena realized she hadn't seen it since the hospital, had assumed Adrian had confiscated it along with her freedom. But when she checked the nightstand, there it was, her old phone, charged and waiting. She picked it up, half expecting it to be locked or monitored, but it opened normally to her passcode. A new contact had been added. "Adrian?" Just his name, no designation of husband or father or captor. She stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone aside and went to shower. Maria appeared with breakfast as Lena was dressing, her smile warm and knowing. "Mr. Russo asked me to tell you that his office is unlocked if you want to review any documents. He also said the estate is yours to explore, the grounds, the library, anywhere you'd like." "Anywhere?" Lena asked skeptically. "Well, perhaps avoid the West Security Station. The men get uncomfortable when Mrs. Russo watches them work." Maria's eyes twinkled. "But yes, anywhere else. This is your home now." Home. The word felt foreign applied to this fortress of wealth and secrets. But Lena nodded, accepting the breakfast tray and waiting until Maria left before eating mechanically, her mind already turning over possibilities. She spent the morning in Adrian's office, Isabella sleeping in a carrier strapped to her chest while Lena pored over files. The legitimate businesses were extensive. Restaurants throughout Chicago and the suburbs, 3 construction companies, a waste management operation that probably did exactly what Adrian had implied it did. The profit margins were remarkable, suggesting either excellent business acumen or creative accounting. Probably both. The illegitimate operations were harder to track, buried in coded language and offshore accounts. But Lena had worked in accounting before the diner, before running, and she knew how to read between lines. Protection payments disguised as consulting fees, gambling proceeds laundered through restaurant receipts, import-export manifests that listed cargo weights inconsistent with declared goods. It was all there, just as Adrian had promised. No more secrets, no more comfortable ignorance. She was so absorbed in a particularly suspicious shipping record that she didn't hear footsteps until Adrian spoke from the doorway. "Find anything interesting?" Lena looked up, startled. He was still in his suit from the morning meeting, but his tie was loosened and there was tension in his shoulders that suggested the Moretti situation hadn't resolved easily. "This import company," she said, pointing to the file. "The manifests don't make sense. You're listing electronic shipments that weigh twice what they should." Adrian moved closer, looking over her shoulder. "Good catch. Those manifests are deliberately inflated. We ship legitimate electronics, but we also ship cash. Payment from European contacts who prefer physical currency to wire transfers. That's money laundering." "Yes." Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. "It's also how we move operational funds without attracting federal attention. The electronics are real, profitable, and provide cover." Lena sat back, processing this. "And if customs ever inspects a shipment?" "We have people at most major ports. Inspections are rare and usually staged." Adrian pulled up a chair beside her, and Lena caught the scent of his cologne mixed with something sharper, stress maybe, or the aftermath of violence. "But even if a shipment gets seized, it's structured so the loss is minimal. We diversify, spread risk across multiple operations." "You've thought of everything." It wasn't quite admiration in Lena's voice, but it wasn't condemnation either, just acknowledgement of the intelligence required to maintain an empire like this. "I try." Adrian's hand came to rest on Isabella's small back, his touch gentle despite whatever he'd been doing all morning. "The meeting went well, by the way. Moretti is reconsidering his expansion plans." Reconsidering, Lena repeated. What does that mean in your world? It means I offered him a partnership in one of our legitimate ventures, shared ownership of a construction company that's bidding on a major city contract. He accepts, he gets rich, and I get a business partner who's invested in keeping peace. He refuses. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then other measures become necessary. What kind of measures? Lena asked, though she suspected she knew. Economic isolation. I've been building alliances with the other families, the Castellanos, the O'Malleys, the Yakuza contingent on the north side. If Moretti pushes forward with aggression, he'll find himself cut off from suppliers, buyers' territory. He'll lose money until he has no choice but to back down or sell out. And if he still doesn't back down? Adrian's eyes met hers, dark and unflinching. Then I'll do what's necessary to protect my family. But I'd prefer the economic solution, less messy, fewer casualties. It was a small thing, that preference for economic warfare over physical violence. But Lena recognized it for what it was. Adrian trying to be different from his father, trying to find solutions that didn't require bloodshed. It wasn't redemption, but it was effort. What if I had ideas? Lena heard herself ask. About the business, ways to transition things. Adrian's attention sharpened. I'm listening. Lena pointed to the restaurant files. These are profitable, right? Legitimately profitable. Very. My father started them as fronts, but they've become genuine successes. The flagship location in River North has a Michelin star. So expand them. Open more restaurants. Maybe franchise. Use the profits to buy out the shadier operations gradually. Lena was thinking out loud now, the way she used to in her accounting classes. Keep the construction and waste management. Those can be cleaned up, made fully legitimate with effort. But the gambling, the protection services, phase them out over time. Replace that income with legal sources. That would take years, Adrian said. Maybe a decade. So, Lena challenged, you're what, 34? You have time. And think about what it would mean for Isabella. She could grow up in a family business that's actually legal. She could go to college, have a normal life, not spend her childhood wondering if her father will end up dead or in prison. Something flickered across Adrian's face, hope mixed with skepticism. The other families wouldn't like it. They'd see it as weakness, abandoning the traditional operations. Then make alliances with families who are thinking the same way. Offer to help them transition too. Lena was warming to the idea now, seeing possibilities. You said yourself the world is changing. Law enforcement is getting smarter. Technology makes it harder to hide. Why not get ahead of it instead of fighting the inevitable? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made Lena's skin prickle. Finally, he said, You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about a lot of things. Lena touched Isabella's sleeping form, grounding herself. Mostly about what kind of world I want her to grow up in. And this, she gestured at the files spread across the desk. This isn't it. But maybe it could become something better, with your help. Adrian's voice was soft, almost wondering. With both of us. Lena corrected. You know the players, the politics, the danger zones. I know business structures, long-term planning, how to make numbers work. Together, she paused, surprised by her own conviction. Together, we could actually do this. Adrian reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on the desk. You're serious. You actually want to help me rebuild this family into something legitimate. I want to build something Isabella can be proud of, Lena said. If that means helping you clean up your empire, then yeah, I'm serious. She watched emotions play across Adrian's face. Relief, gratitude, something that looked almost like awe. Then he was pulling her close, careful of Isabella between them, pressing his forehead to hers in that gesture that was becoming familiar. Thank you, he breathed. You have no idea what this means. I have some idea. Lena's voice was dry. It means a lot of work, a lot of risk, and probably a lot of people wanting us dead for disrupting the status quo. Probably, Adrian agreed, but we'll face it together. They spent the rest of the morning going through files, Lena making notes about which operations could be legitimized and which needed to be shut down entirely. Adrian challenged her assumptions, pointed out complications she hadn't considered, but he was listening, really listening, in a way that made Lena feel like maybe this partnership could actually work. Isabella woke around 11, demanding to be fed, and Lena retreated to the couch by the window while Adrian continued reviewing her notes. She watched him work, this man who'd terrified her becoming familiar through small domestic moments. The way he absently rubbed his jaw when concentrating. The soft Italian curses when numbers didn't add up. The occasional glance toward her and Isabella like he was checking to make sure they were still there. "What?" he asked, catching her staring. "Nothing," Lena said, "just thinking about how strange this is. A week ago I was in Knoxville thinking I'd never see you again. Now I'm helping you plan the reformation of a crime empire while nursing our daughter in your office." "Our office," Adrian corrected. "If we're partners, it's ours." The possessive pronoun should have bothered her. Instead, it settled something in Lena's chest, the acknowledgement that she belonged here, that she had claim to this space and this life. "Our office?" she agreed. They were interrupted by Katerina appearing in the doorway, her expression troubled. "Adriano, we have a problem." Adrian was on his feet instantly, the casual businessman persona shifting into something harder and more dangerous. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that's currently sitting in the front parlor demanding to see you." Katerina's eyes flicked to Lena. "He knows about the wedding, about the baby." Adrian's jaw clenched. "Who?" "Michael Castellano." The name meant nothing to Lena, but Adrian's reaction told her everything she needed to know. This was important and probably dangerous. "I'll handle it," Adrian said, already moving toward the door. "Wait." Lena stood carefully, shifting Isabella to her shoulder. "If he knows about me, shouldn't I meet him? We're supposed to be married. Hiding me sends the wrong message." Adrian stopped, turned back. "Lena, Castellano he's dangerous in ways you don't understand. Not violent, but calculating. He'll see you as leverage, as weakness. Then let him see me as strength." Lena moved closer, meeting Adrian's eyes. "I'm your wife, the mother of your child. Either I'm part of this world or I'm not. You can't protect me by keeping me hidden." She could see him struggling with it, the instinct to shield her warring with the logic of her argument. Finally, Katerina spoke up. "She's right, Adriano. Better he meets her now on our terms, when she chooses to be here. Shows unity, shows strength." Adrian looked between his mother and his wife, then sighed. "Fine. But let me do the talking. And if I signal you to leave, you leave immediately. Understood?" "Understood." Lena shifted Isabella into the carrier again, wanting both hands free. "Let's go meet your dangerous friend." The front parlor was exactly as intimidating as the rest of the house. High ceilings, expensive furniture, artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses. And sitting in the center of it all, looking entirely comfortable despite being in someone else's territory, was a man who radiated controlled power. Michael Castellano was probably in his 50s, silver hair swept back from a face that was handsome in a weathered, dangerous way. His suit was immaculate, his posture relaxed, but his eyes tracked their entrance with the precision of a predator assessing prey. "Adrian," he said, standing with fluid grace, "and this must be the famous Mrs. Russo I've been hearing about." "News travels fast," Adrian said, his voice neutral. "In our world, always." Castellano's gaze settled on Lena, assessing and intelligent. "Congratulations on your marriage. And the baby. Isabella, isn't it? Beautiful name." The fact that he knew their daughter's name made Lena's skin crawl, but she kept her expression pleasant. "Thank you, Mr. Castellano." "Michael, please, we're practically family, given our business associations." He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Though I admit, I was surprised to hear about the wedding. Adrian has always been so careful about his personal life, and you," his gaze sharpened, "you appeared quite suddenly, didn't you? No courtship, no engagement period. Just a quiet ceremony with only family present." "We preferred privacy," Lena said, feeling Adrian tense beside her. Of course. Castellano waved a hand dismissively. "Though privacy is difficult to maintain when one is married to Adrian Russo. I'm sure you're learning that." "I'm learning a lot of things," Lena said carefully. "I'm sure you are." Castellano turned his attention back to Adrian. "Which brings me to why I'm here. I understand you've been making moves regarding the Moretti situation, offering partnerships, forming alliances." "Business as usual," Adrian said. "Unusual business, though. You're not typically so generous with competitors." Castellano's smile sharpened. "Some might wonder if new fatherhood has made you soft, if having a wife and child means you're less willing to make hard choices." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Adrian's entire body went rigid, and Lena felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "Some might wonder that," Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. Those people would be making a fatal mistake. Would they? Castellano's gaze flicked to Lena, to Isabella. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've given me considerable leverage. A wife, a daughter, both so fragile, so vulnerable. Lena felt Adrian move, saw the violence gathering in him, and knew she had seconds before this went somewhere terrible, so she did the only thing she could think of. She laughed. Both men turned to stare at her, and Lena let her amusement show clearly. I'm sorry. It's just... Did you really come here to threaten a 2-week-old baby? Is that the kind of man you are, Mr. Castellano? Castellano's expression went cold. I'm the kind of man who understands leverage when I see it, and I'm the kind of woman who understands posturing. Lena shifted Isabella slightly, making sure Castellano could see her daughter's peaceful face. You're not here to threaten us. You're here to test Adrian. See if fatherhood has compromised his judgment. Well, let me save you the trouble. It hasn't. She moved closer to Castellano, close enough to be bold, close enough to make her point. My husband has built an empire on calculated violence and strategic thinking. Having a family doesn't change that. It just gives him more reason to be ruthless when protecting what's his. Castellano studied her with new interest. You're more than just a pretty face, aren't you? I'm Adrian's partner, Lena said firmly, in business and in life. Which means threats to me are threats to him. And threats to him are met with, well, you know what they're met with. You've been in this world long enough. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Castellano threw back his head and laughed, genuinely amused rather than threatening. I like her, he announced to Adrian. She's got spine and brains. No wonder you married her so quickly. Adrian's posture relaxed fractionally. Lena is full of surprises. I can see that. Castellano turned back to Lena. Mrs. Russo, I apologize for testing you, but in our world, weakness is death. I needed to know if you understood that. I'm learning, Lena said, quickly. Good. Castellano moved toward the door, then paused. Adrian, about the Moretti situation. I'm in. The construction partnership is smart business, and I appreciate the way you're handling things. More profitable than warfare, less messy. That's the goal, Adrian said carefully. Your father wouldn't have approved. He believed in traditional methods. Castellano's smile was knowing. But your father is dead and you're building something different. I respect that. As long as you remember that different doesn't mean weak. I remember, Adrian said. See that you do. Castellano nodded to Lena. Mrs. Russo, congratulations again. Raise that beautiful daughter to be as fierce as her mother. Then he was gone, leaving Lena and Adrian alone in the parlor's oppressive silence. Adrian was shaking. Lena could see it in his hands, the way his shoulders trembled with adrenaline or fury or fear. She set Isabella down in her carrier and went to him, touching his arm gently. Hey, we're okay. He was testing us, and we passed. He threatened you. Adrian's voice was rough. Threatened Isabella. You should have done exactly what you did, Lena interrupted. Stayed controlled. Let me handle it. Showed him we're unified. You shouldn't have had to handle it. Adrian pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. You shouldn't have to face down men like Castellano, defend yourself and our daughter while I stand there letting it happen. That's what partnership means, Lena said softly. We protect each other. Sometimes that's physical. Sometimes it's strategic. Today, I could say things you couldn't without starting a war, so I said them. Adrian pulled back enough to look at her, and there was something raw in his eyes. You're terrifying, you know that? Standing up to one of the most dangerous men in Chicago like you were discussing the weather. I was terrified, Lena admitted. But I was also angry. He came into our home, looked at our daughter, and made threats. I wasn't going to let that stand. Our home, Adrian repeated softly. You called it our home. Lena realized what she'd said, how naturally the words had come. This fortress, this prison, this impossible situation, somewhere in the last week it had become home. Not because the house was beautiful or the security was impressive, but because it was where her daughter was, where Adrian was, where she was building something that might actually matter. Yeah, she said quietly. I guess I did. Adrian kissed her then, and it was different from the gentle press of lips at their wedding. This was desperate and grateful and filled with all the fear he'd been holding while Castellano threatened his family. Lena kissed him back. letting herself feel the relief and the terror and the strange, complicated affection growing between them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Isabella was crying, probably hungry again or needing to be changed. The mundane interruption of parenting cutting through the drama like a knife through fog. "I've got her," Adrian said, already moving to pick up their daughter. "You've earned a break from being fierce." Lena watched him soothe Isabella, watched the way his entire body language shifted from crime boss to father, and felt something settle in her chest. This was real. The danger was real, the threats were real, but so was this, the three of them, building something together. That afternoon, while Isabella napped, Adrian took Lena down to the estate's private beach, a strip of sand along the lake that was completely hidden from outside view. They walked in silence, Lena still recovering enough that the exercise tired her quickly, Adrian matching his pace to hers with obvious care. "I meant what I said," Lena finally said, "about this being our home, about us being partners." "I know." Adrian's hand found hers. "But Lena, what happened today with Castellano, that's going to keep happening. There will always be someone testing us, looking for weakness, threatening what we love. Can you live with that?" Lena thought about the question seriously, watching waves lap at the sand. "I don't know. A week ago I would have said no, even 3 days ago, but today—" She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Today I realized something. I've been afraid my whole life. Afraid of poverty, afraid of violence, afraid of the men my mother brought home, afraid of losing what little I had. Running from you was just more fear. And now?" Adrian asked quietly. "Now I'm choosing something different." Lena turned to face him, the lake wind whipping her hair around her face. "I'm choosing to stop running, to stand and fight for what I want. To build instead of hide." "What do you want?" The question was vulnerable, almost childlike in its need for reassurance. Lena looked at this man who'd destroyed her peace and demanded her surrender, and was now standing on a beach asking what she wanted, like her answer mattered more than anything else in his world. "I want Isabella to be safe," she said. "I want to transform your empire into something legitimate. I want to prove that people like us, damaged and complicated and built from broken pieces, can create something good." "And me?" Adrian's voice was barely audible over the waves. "Do you want me?" It was the question neither of them had asked directly, the one lurking under every conversation and decision. Lena felt the weight of it, the impossibility of answering honestly. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "I'm not ready to love you again, Adrian. Maybe I never will be. What you did, forcing my hand, threatening me, controlling everything, that doesn't just disappear because we're playing house." Adrian flinched, but he didn't look away. "I know, but," Lena continued, "I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can build something real from this disaster. If we can become partners who respect each other, maybe eventually partners who love each other too." "That's more than I deserve," Adrian said. "Way more," Lena agreed. "So don't waste it. Don't go back to your father's methods. Don't try to control me when you get scared. Trust that I'm here because I'm choosing to be, not because I'm trapped." "Well, what if you change your mind?" The fear in Adrian's voice was naked now. "What if you try this and decide it's not enough? That I'm not enough?" Lena stepped closer until they were nearly touching. "Then we'll deal with it together. As partners. As parents. Maybe not as lovers, but as people who share a daughter and a goal and a complicated history." She reached up, touched his face, felt him tremble under her palm. "But Adrian, I need you to hear this. If you ever lie to me again, if you ever manipulate me or try to control me through fear, I will leave. I'll find a way, no matter what it costs. Because I can accept a lot of things. I can accept your past, your business, your world. But I can't accept being treated like property instead of a person." "Never again," Adrian said fiercely. "I swear to you, Lena. No more lies, no more manipulation. We do this as equals or not at all." "Equals," Lena repeated. "That's all I'm asking." Adrian pulled her close then, and they stood on the sand with the lake wind around them and the mansion rising behind them, and Isabella sleeping safe in her nursery. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't simple. But it was theirs, messy and complicated and built on questionable foundations. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the best things were built from broken pieces, reformed and reshaped into something stronger than the original parts. They walked back to the house as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, that seemed almost too beautiful for the darkness lurking in their lives. But beauty and darkness coexisted in this world, Lena was learning. Just like love and fear, trust and caution, freedom and security. Nothing was simple. Everything was negotiated. And somehow, that made the victory sweeter. When they reached the house, Katerina met them at the door with Isabella, who'd woken hungry and demanding. Lena took her daughter, settled into a chair by the window to nurse, and watched Adrian watch them both with that expression of wonder that never quite faded. "Your mother wants to throw a party," Adrian said. "Introduce you properly to the family and our business associates." "A party?" Lena looked up from Isabella. "Is that safe, after Castellano's visit?" "It's necessary," Katerina said, entering the room with her usual elegant authority. "If we hide you, it suggests weakness or shame. If we present you confidently, it sends a message. Adrian has chosen a partner, and she is under family protection." "It also puts a target on my back," Lena pointed out. "The target is already there," Adrian said. "The party just makes the protection official. Every family in Chicago will see you, know you're mine, understand that harming you means war." It was twisted logic, crime family thinking that turned a celebration into a strategic maneuver. But Lena understood the necessity of it. "When?" she asked. 2 weeks, Katerina said. "Gives you time to heal properly and time to prepare." "Prepare how?" Katerina's smile was knowing. How to navigate conversations with dangerous people. How to read alliances and threats. How to be Adrian's wife in public without revealing too much or too little. "You're going to teach me how to be a Mafia wife," Lena said flatly. "I'm going to teach you how to survive in this world," Katerina corrected. "There's a difference. You already have the instincts. I saw that today with Castellano. Now you just need the polish." Lena looked at Adrian, who shrugged. "She taught me everything I know about reading people. If you're going to be my partner in this, you need to understand the political landscape." It made sense, in the same twisted way everything in this world made sense. Lena was in this life whether she liked it or not. She could navigate it blindly and hope for the best, or she could learn from someone who'd survived decades in it. "Okay," she said. "Teach me." Katerina's smile was approving. "We start tomorrow. For now, rest. You've earned it." That night, Lena lay in bed beside Adrian, Isabella sleeping peacefully between them in her bassinet. The room was quiet, except for their daughter's soft breathing and the distant sound of lake water against the shore. "Are you scared?" Adrian asked quietly in the darkness. "Terrified," Lena admitted. "Of the party, of Moretti, of raising Isabella in this world, of everything." "Me too," Adrian confessed. "Every day I'm afraid I'll wake up and you'll be gone. That this," he gestured at the space between them, "that this fragile thing we're building will shatter and I'll lose you both." "Then we'll be scared together," Lena said, "and we'll build it stronger." She reached for his hand in the darkness, threaded their fingers together. It was becoming a habit, this connection, in the quiet hours when guards were down and honesty felt possible. "I'm glad you came," Adrian said softly, "to the hospital, that you didn't just take Isabella and run again." I almost did," Lena admitted. "Part of me wanted to, but the smarter part, the part that knew I couldn't outrun you forever, that part chose differently." "I would have found you," Adrian said, "no matter where you went, no matter how long it took." "I know," Lena's voice was sad. "That's why I stopped running." They fell silent, both of them thinking about the impossible path that had led here, about choices made from fear and choices made from hope, and the thin line between the two. Finally, Lena spoke again. "Tomorrow, when your mother starts teaching me, I want to learn everything, not just social skills. I want to know how power works in your world, who can be trusted, who's dangerous, all of it." "Why?" Adrian asked. "Because if I'm going to help you transform this empire, I need to understand it completely. The good, the bad, and the ugly." Lena turned her head to look at him in the darkness. "And because I want to protect Isabella, which means I need to know what I'm protecting her from." Adrian was quiet for a moment, then, "You're remarkable, you know that? Most people would be running as fast as possible. You're running toward it." "I'm done running," Lena said simply. "From now on, I stand and fight." And she meant it. Something had shifted in her over the last few days, from captive to partner, from victim to strategist. She didn't know if it was growth or just survival adaptation, but she knew that this woman who'd fled Chicago 7 months ago was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who could stand up to men like Castellano and plan the reformation of criminal empires and choose to stay in a marriage built on coercion because it served her daughter's future. Someone who could live with the contradictions, who could love and fear the same man, who could build a life from broken pieces and call it home. It wasn't the future she'd imagined, but lying there in the darkness, listening to Isabella breathe and feeling Adrian's hand warm in hers, Lena thought maybe it was the future she could actually have. Not perfect, not pure, but possible. And in this world, in this life, possible was enough. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of education that felt more like combat training than social preparation. Katerina was relentless, drilling Lena on family histories and business relationships, teaching her to read the subtle signs that indicated alliance or threat. They practiced conversations over breakfast, role-played scenarios during Isabella's nap times, dissected past gatherings to understand what had been said beneath polite words. Michael Castellano will likely bring his wife, Teresa, Katerina explained one morning while Lena nursed Isabella. She seems harmless, always talking about charity work and her grandchildren, but she's actually his most trusted advisor. Anything you tell her reaches Michael within the hour. So I should avoid her? Lena asked. No, you should use her. If you want Michael to know something, tell Teresa. If you want to plant ideas in his head, let her think they're her own observations. Katerina's smile was sharp. Never underestimate the wives, Lena. We're often more dangerous than our husbands because people forget to watch us. Lena absorbed this lesson along with dozens of others. She learned which families were allies and which were rivals held in check only by mutual benefit. She learned the difference between a business associate and a true friend. The former could be bought or intimidated, the latter were rare and precious. She learned to smile through veiled insults and to deliver her own with such sweetness that the target wouldn't realize they'd been cut until hours later. Most importantly, she learned that being Adrian's wife meant being a strategist in her own right. The women in this world weren't decorative accessories. They were power brokers operating under cover of domesticity, shaping outcomes through whispered words and careful alliances. You're a natural, Katerina said, after a particularly good session where Lena had successfully navigated a mock conversation about the Moretti situation without revealing anything Adrian wouldn't want shared. You think like we do, always calculating, always 3 moves ahead. I survived 7 months alone and pregnant by thinking 3 moves ahead, Lena said. This is just a different game. Same game, higher stakes. Katerina's expression turned serious. At this party, you'll meet people who smile while planning your murder, people who will try to turn you against Adrian or use you to weaken him. You cannot show fear. You cannot show doubt. You must be absolutely certain in your position as his wife and partner. What if I'm not certain? Lena asked quietly. Then you lie. Katerina's voice was firm. You lie convincingly enough that even you believe it. Because in our world, perception is reality. If people believe you're weak, you are. If people believe you're powerful, you become so. That night, Lena stood in front of the full-length mirror in her dressing room, studying the woman reflected there. In 2 days, she would face Chicago's criminal elite as Adrian Russo's wife. The dress Katerina had chosen was elegant but not showy, midnight blue silk that skimmed her still-healing body, making her look graceful rather than fragile. Her hair would be up, her makeup minimal, her jewelry the wedding ring Adrian had given her and nothing more. You look terrified, Adrian said from the doorway. Lena met his eyes in the mirror. I am terrified. He moved closer, his hands settling on her shoulders. You stood up to Castellano without blinking. You've absorbed 2 weeks of political training like you were born to it. You've reorganized my business files and found inefficiencies I've been missing for years. Why are you scared of a party? Because at the party, I can't be me, Lena said. I have to be Mrs. Russo. Perfect and poised and completely in control. What if I slip? What if I say the wrong thing and people see through the act? It's not an act. Adrian turned her to face him, his expression intense. You are Mrs. Russo. You are my partner. You don't have to pretend to be anything other than what you already are. Strong, intelligent, fierce when protecting what you love. Your mother says I have to lie. Be certain even when I'm not. My mother is right about most things. Adrian's smile was small. But you don't have to lie about the important stuff. If someone asks if you love me, tell them the truth, that we're building something complicated and real. If they ask if you're happy, tell them you're committed to making this work. Honesty, when carefully delivered, is often the best strategy. Lena searched his face. And if they ask if I came willingly, tell them yes. Adrian's hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. Because that's technically true. You chose to get in the car at the hospital. You chose to marry me. You chose to stay. The circumstances around those choices, well, nobody needs those details. It was casuistry, the kind of careful word parsing that politicians and criminals excelled at. But Lena understood the necessity. In this world, truth and lies existed on a spectrum, and survival meant knowing exactly where to position yourself on it. The night of the party arrived with spring rain that turned the estate's grounds into something from a Gothic novel, dramatic and moody and somehow appropriate for what was essentially Lena's debut as a crime boss's wife. She dressed carefully with Maria's help, let Katerina approve her appearance, and tried not to think about the fact that she was still recovering from major surgery and would be spending the evening on her feet, smiling through pain. Adrian found her in the nursery, saying goodnight to Isabella before the guests arrived. Their daughter was growing fast, her features becoming more defined, and Lena could see Adrian in the shape of her eyes, the curve of her mouth, a living testament to the night they'd created her, back when things had been simple and possibility had felt infinite. She'll sleep through it, Maria promised. I'll stay with her the entire time. And the security? Lena asked Adrian. Doubled. Guards on every entrance, cameras monitoring everything, panic buttons in every room. Adrian's voice was calm, but Lena could see the tension in his shoulders. Nobody gets near her without going through multiple checkpoints. Okay. Lena kissed Isabella's forehead, breathing in that perfect baby smell. Okay, let's do this. The party was being held in the estate's grand ballroom, a space Lena had only glimpsed in passing, now transformed into something elegant and intimidating. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished floors. A small orchestra played soft jazz in one corner. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per bite than Lena used to make in a day. And everywhere, dangerous people in expensive clothes, watching her entrance with calculation in their eyes. Adrian's hand settled on the small of her back, a gesture of both support and possession. Ready? No, Lena admitted, but let's go anyway. They descended the staircase together, and conversation in the ballroom quieted as people turned to watch. Lena felt the weight of their attention, felt herself being assessed and categorized and judged. She lifted her chin, channeled every lesson Katerina had drilled into her, and met their gazes with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. The first hour was a whirlwind of introductions. Lena smiled and shook hands and made appropriate small talk while memorizing faces and names, matching them to the dossiers Katerina had made her study. The Castellanos were there, Michael with his wife Teresa, both watching Lena with interest that felt predatory. The O'Malleys, an Irish family that controlled the docks, their patriarch Sean making jokes that had edges like knives. Representatives from the Yakuza contingent, formal and precise, assessing her with unreadable expressions. And everywhere, wives. Women like Katerina had described, seemingly decorative but actually deadly, operating their own networks of influence and information. They welcomed Lena with varying degrees of warmth, each interaction a test she had to navigate carefully. Mrs. Russo, Teresa Castellano said, cornering Lena near the refreshment table. How wonderful to finally meet you. We'd heard rumors, of course, but Adrian kept you quite secret. We preferred a private courtship, Lena said smoothly, using the script she and Katerina had practiced. And such a quick marriage. You must have swept him off his feet. Teresa's smile didn't reach her eyes. Though I understand there was a baby involved. How traditional? The implication was clear. Lena had trapped Adrian with a pregnancy, forced his hand. It was close enough to the truth to sting, but Lena had prepared for this. Isabella was a surprise, she said, her voice warm. But the best kind. Adrian and I both wanted a family. We just didn't expect it to happen quite so quickly. And you're happy? Teresa pressed. Living here, married to a man like Adrian? It's quite a change from, what was it you did before? Waitressing? So they dug into her background. Of course they had. Lena felt Adrian tense beside her, but she touched his arm lightly, signaling she could handle this. I worked several jobs before meeting Adrian, yes. I'm not ashamed of honest work. Lena's smile was pleasant but firm. And I'm very happy. My husband is devoted to our daughter and to building a future we can both be proud of. What more could I want? Teresa's eyes sharpened. A future you can be proud of. Interesting phrasing. Does that mean changes are coming to the Russo operations? It was a trap, beautifully laid. If Lena confirmed changes, it would be seen as weakness or betrayal of tradition. If she denied them, she'd be lying, and Teresa would know it. Lena chose a third option. I believe the best families adapt to changing times while maintaining their core values. Adrian's father built something impressive, and Adrian is building on that foundation in his own way. That's not change, that's evolution. She watched Teresa process this, saw the moment the older woman realized Lena wasn't going to be an easy mark. Teresa's smile shifted, became more genuine. Well said, my dear. Michael will be pleased to hear it. Teresa touched Lena's arm lightly. You're sharper than people expected. That's good. You'll need to be, married to Adrian. It wasn't quite approval, but it wasn't hostility either. Lena had passed the test, at least for now. The evening continued in similar fashion, conversations that were really negotiations, compliments that were really threats, alliances forming and dissolving in the space between champagne sips. Lena navigated it all with growing confidence, using the skills Katerina had taught her, relying on her own instincts when the scripts ran out. She was talking with Sean O'Malley's daughter, a sharp-eyed woman named Bridget, who ran her family's legitimate shipping operations when Adrian appeared at her elbow. Could I borrow my wife for a moment? He asked politely. Bridget smiled knowingly. Of course. We'll finish our conversation later, Lena. Adrian guided Lena onto the small dance floor, pulling her into his arms as the orchestra shifted to a waltz. Lena went rigid. They'd never danced together, hadn't had that kind of relationship before everything went wrong. Relax, Adrian murmured. I know you're tired. I saw you favoring your left side. We'll dance for one song, then I'll get you somewhere you can sit. I'm fine, Lena lied. You're in pain and you've been on your feet for 3 hours. Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. You're also doing brilliantly. Everyone's impressed. But you don't have to prove anything more tonight. Lena let herself lean into him slightly, grateful for the support. Teresa Castellano knows about my background, about the waitressing. I know, I heard. Adrian's hand tightened on her waist. You handled it perfectly, better than I could have. She was testing me, trying to find weakness, and found strength instead. Adrian looked down at her, something like pride in his eyes. You're a natural at this, Lena. You see the games? Play them better than people who've been doing this for decades. I don't like that I'm good at it, Lena admitted quietly. I don't like what it says about me. It says you're a survivor, that you adapt, that you're exactly the kind of partner I need. Adrian spun her gently, careful of her healing body. Also, you look beautiful tonight. I know I haven't said it, but you do. Lena looked up at him. This man who'd forced her hand and demanded her surrender and was now waltzing with her like she was something precious. You're trying to seduce me with compliments at your crime family party? I'm trying to tell you the truth. Adrian's expression was serious. You're beautiful. You're brilliant. And I'm grateful every single day that you chose to stay. I didn't have much choice, Lena reminded him. You had more than you think. Adrian's voice dropped lower. You could have fought me harder. Could have made this impossible. Could have stayed physically present but emotionally absent. Instead, you're here, really here, partnering with me in ways I didn't dare hope for. Before Lena could respond, there was a commotion at the ballroom entrance. Adrian's entire body went taut, his hand moving to where Lena knew he kept a weapon concealed under his jacket. Antonio Moretti had arrived. The music didn't stop, but conversation dimmed as people turned to watch. Moretti was younger than Lena expected, maybe 40. Handsome in a cold way, with eyes that assessed the room like a general surveying a battlefield. He moved with confidence that bordered on arrogance, 2 bodyguards flanking him. He wasn't invited, Adrian said quietly, his voice deadly calm. Then why is he here? Lena asked. To make a statement, to challenge me in front of everyone. Adrian's jaw clenched. Stay close. Don't leave my side. Moretti crossed the ballroom floor, people parting before him like water. He stopped directly in front of Adrian and Lena, his smile pleasant and his eyes calculating. Adrian, congratulations on your marriage. I apologize for not sending a gift. I only just heard about the happy news. Moretti's gaze slid to Lena. Mrs. Russo, a pleasure. Mr. Moretti. Lena kept her voice neutral, feeling Adrian's tension radiating through their joined hands. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, Moretti continued, his tone conversational, but I felt it was important to meet the woman who's inspired such interesting changes in the Russo operations. Word is you're transitioning to more legitimate enterprises. Word travels, Adrian said coldly. It does, and not everyone is pleased about it. Moretti's smile sharpened. Some see it as weakness, abandoning tradition for domesticity. Some would be wrong. Lena heard herself speak before she'd consciously decided to. My husband is making strategic decisions to ensure long-term stability and growth. That's not weakness, that's intelligence. Moretti turned his full attention to her, and Lena felt the weight of it, the danger. You're very confident for someone so new to our world. I'm confident in my husband's judgment, Lena said steadily, and in our shared vision for the future. Shared vision. Moretti seemed to taste the words. Interesting. Tell me, Mrs. Russo, does this shared vision include eliminating competition, or has marriage made Adrian soft? It was a direct challenge, calling Adrian's manhood and authority into question in front of everyone who mattered. Lena felt Adrian about to respond, felt the violence gathering in him, and knew instinctively that whatever he said would escalate this into something bloody. So she laughed. The sound cut through the tension, surprising everyone, including Moretti. Lena let her amusement show clearly. Mr. Moretti, you've mistaken evolution for weakness. My husband doesn't need to eliminate competition. He's creating opportunities that make competition irrelevant. That's why you're here tonight, isn't it? Because you recognize that opposing him means being left behind while the rest of us move forward. She stepped closer to Moretti, close enough to be bold. You can fight the future or you can profit from it. Adrian has made his choice. The question is, have you made yours? The ballroom had gone completely silent. Lena could feel dozens of eyes on them, could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge between violence and resolution. Moretti studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. You've chosen well, Adrian. She's got more balls than half the men in this room. Moretti's expression shifted, became more calculating than hostile. Perhaps we should discuss this shared vision of yours. I'm intrigued. My office, Monday morning. Adrian's voice was still cold, but the immediate threat of violence had passed. We'll talk about opportunities. Monday, then. Moretti nodded to Lena. Mrs. Russo, you're more than just a pretty face. I respect that. He left then, his bodyguards following, and the ballroom erupted into whispered conversation. Lena felt her legs go weak, adrenaline crash hitting her hard, but she kept her smile in place until Adrian could guide her to a quiet alcove away from prying eyes. What the hell were you thinking? Adrian's voice was rough with fear and anger. Challenging Moretti like that. He could have what? Shot me at your party in front of 50 witnesses? Lena leaned against the wall, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. I was thinking that you were about to start something that would end in bloodshed. I was thinking that someone needed to give him an off-ramp that saved face. By putting yourself in the line of fire, by being your partner, Lena interrupted. Isn't that what we agreed? That we'd protect each other, support each other, even when it's scary? Adrian stared at her, emotions warring across his face. Then he pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers in that gesture that was becoming their touchstone. You're going to give me a heart attack, he said roughly. Standing up to Castellano, now Moretti, Lena, these are dangerous men. I know, but I'm dangerous too, apparently. Lena's smile was shaky. Your mother was right. Perception is reality. I made them perceive me as your equal partner. Now they have to treat me as one. They also see you as a threat now. Adrian's voice was worried. That changes the calculation. Good. Lena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Let them see me as a threat. Let them understand that to get to you, they have to go through me, and I won't make it easy. Adrian kissed her then, right there in the alcove with the party continuing beyond, and it was desperate and grateful and something that felt dangerously close to love. Lena kissed him back, letting herself feel the relief and terror and strange exhilaration of having survived her baptism by fire. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Katerina appeared with impeccable timing. That was either brilliant or suicidal, she said mildly. I'm still deciding which. Both, Lena and Adrian said simultaneously, then laughed, real laughter that broke the tension. Well, suicidal or not, it worked. The room is buzzing. Everyone's impressed. Katerina's smile was proud. You've established yourself, Lena. They'll remember this night. Remember that Adrian's wife is not to be underestimated. Can I go check on Isabella now? Lena asked weakly. I think I've done enough establishing for one evening. Yes, go. I'll make your excuses. Katerina kissed her cheek. You did well, daughter. Better than well. Lena let Adrian guide her upstairs, her entire body shaking now that she didn't have to maintain appearances. They found Isabella sleeping peacefully, Maria dozing in the rocking chair beside her crib. Everything quiet? Adrian asked softly. Like a dream, Maria confirmed. She fed once around 8, been sleeping ever since. After Maria left, Lena sank into the rocking chair, just watching Isabella breathe. Adrian stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, and they stayed like that for a long time. Two people who'd been terrified and were now safe, at least for the moment. I meant what I said to Moretti, Lena finally said, about our shared vision. I want to help you transform this, Adrian, really transform it. I know, and we will. Adrian's hands tightened slightly. But Lena, tonight, the risks you took were necessary, Lena interrupted. You said it yourself, I'm your partner. Partners take risks for each other. Not risks that could get them killed. Then stop putting me in positions where those are the only options available. Lena looked up at him. You want me safe? Help me make this world safer. Help me turn your empire into something that doesn't require constant violence to maintain. Adrian moved around the chair, kneeling in front of her so they were eye to eye. It'll take years, maybe decades, and there will still be danger that never completely goes away. I know. Lena touched his face gently. But we start now. We start with Moretti on Monday. You offer him legitimate partnerships, ways to profit without warfare. We start with transitioning the gambling operations into legal gaming. We start with using our resources to help people instead of just exploiting them. You've been thinking about this. Adrian's voice held wonder. I've been thinking about a lot of things. Lena looked down at Isabella. Mostly about what kind of world I want her to grow up in. And this, what we have now, it's not good enough. But it could become something better. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, we start Monday. We offer Moretti partnerships. We begin the transition. Really? Lena had expected more resistance. Really? Adrian's smile was small but genuine. You're right. If we're going to do this, raise Isabella in this world, we need to make it a world worth living in, and I can't do that alone. You don't have to. Lena leaned forward, kissing him softly. That's what partners are for. They stayed in the nursery until the sounds of the party below faded, until the last guests had left and the house grew quiet. Then they carried Isabella to their bedroom, settled her in the bassinet, and lay together in the darkness. I'm proud of you, Adrian said quietly. Tonight, the way you handled everything. I've never seen anything like it. I was terrified the entire time, Lena admitted. I know. That's what made it so impressive. You were scared, and you did it anyway. Adrian's hand found hers in the darkness. That's courage, Lena. Real courage. Lena threaded her fingers through his. Ask me. Ask you what? The question you've been wanting to ask since I agreed to stay. The one you're afraid of the answer to. Adrian was silent for so long, Lena thought he might not do it. Then very quietly, Are you happy? Here, with me in this life we're building. Lena thought about the question seriously, knowing he deserved an honest answer. I don't know if happy is the right word. I'm committed. I'm invested. I'm choosing this every day, even when it's hard. That's not the same as happy, Adrian said, and there was pain in his voice. No, it's not. Lena turned to face him in the darkness. But Adrian, I don't know if I'll ever be happy the way other people are happy. I've been running and scared for too long. Happiness feels like something that happens to other people. What about love? The question was barely audible. Do you think you could love me again? Eventually? Lena felt tears prick her eyes, hot and unexpected. I think I never stopped loving you. That's the problem. I loved you when I ran. I loved you while I was hiding. I loved you even when I was terrified of you. She paused, swallowing hard. But love isn't enough, Adrian. My mother loved men who hurt her. I loved you, and you still forced my hand, manipulated me, took away my choices. I know. Adrian's voice was rough with regret. And I'm sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life being sorry for that. I don't want your apology, Lena said. I want your partnership. I want you to keep your promises, No more lies, no more manipulation, no more treating me like property. I want you to choose me the way I'm choosing you, every day, even when it's hard. I can do that, Adrian said. I will do that. Then ask me again, Lena said. In a year, after we've survived Moretti and started the transition and proven that this thing we're building can actually work. Ask me if I'm happy. Ask me if I love you. And I'll give you a real answer. A year, Adrian repeated. A year, 12 months to prove we can be partners who trust each other, who support each other, who build something worth having together. And if at the end of the year the answer is no, Adrian asked, if you're not happy, if you don't love me, Lena thought about this carefully. Then we figure it out, as partners, as parents, maybe not as a couple, but as people who share a daughter and a goal. We make it work because we have to, for Isabella. It wasn't the romantic answer Adrian probably wanted, but it was honest, and Lena could tell he appreciated that honesty even through his disappointment. Okay, he said finally. A year. We build something worth having, and then we see. We see, Lena agreed. They fell asleep like that, hands joined in the darkness, Isabella breathing softly between them. And Lena thought that maybe this was happiness after all. Not the fairy tale kind, not the pure and simple kind, but the complicated, hard-won kind that came from choosing to stay when running would be easier. The months that followed were a blur of careful transformation. Monday's meeting with Moretti went better than anyone expected. Adrian offered partnerships in legitimate construction ventures, and Moretti, still impressed by Lena's boldness at the party, agreed to explore the possibilities. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was a foundation for something other than warfare. Lena threw herself into the business, working with Adrian to identify which operations could be legitimized and which needed to be phased out entirely. The gambling proved trickier than expected, but she found legal gaming consultants who helped them understand the regulatory landscape. The protection services were gradually transformed into actual security companies, complete with licenses and insurance. It was slow work, frustrating work. There were setbacks and complications, and moments when violence still seemed like the easier option. But Adrian held to his promise. No more unnecessary bloodshed, no more reflexive intimidation. He tried diplomacy first, economics second, and only resorted to force when absolutely necessary. Isabella grew through it all, oblivious to the transformation happening around her. She smiled her first real smile at 6 weeks, laughed for the first time at 2 months, started reaching for things at 3 months. Lena documented every milestone with the fierce joy of a mother who'd fought hard for the right to raise her daughter in relative safety. And somewhere in the midst of business meetings and sleepless nights, and the 1,000 small negotiations that made up marriage and partnership, something shifted between Lena and Adrian. The wariness faded gradually, replaced by something that looked more like trust. The careful distance they'd maintained dissolved into comfort. The partnership they'd agreed to became something that felt more like partnership and less like strategic alliance. Katerina watched it happen with knowing satisfaction, occasionally reminding Lena that she'd predicted exactly this outcome. You were always going to love him, she'd say. The question was whether you'd let yourself. On a cool evening in early autumn, exactly 1 year after Isabella's birth, Lena found herself on the estate's private beach again, the same place where she and Adrian had stood before the party, before Moretti, before everything that had come after. Isabella was with Katerina for the evening, giving Lena and Adrian a rare moment alone. 1 year, Adrian said, coming to stand beside her. You said to ask again in a year. Lena looked out at the lake, dark water reflecting early stars. I remember. Are you happy? Adrian asked quietly. Lena thought about the question seriously, the same way she had a year ago, but the answer was different now. Yeah, she said, surprised by how true it felt. I think I am, not in the uncomplicated way, not without concerns or fears, but happy in the way that matters, content with what we're building, proud of what we've accomplished, hopeful about the future. And love? Adrian's voice was careful, like he was afraid of the answer. Lena turned to face him, studying this man who'd destroyed her peace and demanded her surrender and then spent a year proving he could be the partner he'd promised to be. I love you, she said simply. I probably never stopped, but now I also trust you, and that's more important. Adrian's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, there was moisture there. Thank you for choosing this, for choosing me, for giving me the chance I didn't deserve. You've earned it, Lena said. This year, the way you've handled things, the way you've kept your promises, the way you've been with Isabella, you've earned it. Adrian pulled her close then, and Lena went willingly, fitting against him like she'd been designed for exactly this purpose. They stood like that for a long time. Two people who'd taken the most complicated path to something simple and true. I have something for you, Adrian said finally, pulling back slightly to reach into his pocket. He produced a small box, and Lena's heart jumped. If that's another ring, I swear to... It's not a ring, Adrian interrupted, smiling. Open it. Inside the box was a key. Small, simple, unremarkable, except for what it represented. What's this? Lena asked. Key to a house, Adrian said. In River North, near the restaurant. 3 bedrooms, good schools nearby, normal neighborhood. I put it in your name only. Not joint ownership, just yours. If you ever want to leave, if you ever need space, if this life becomes too much, you have somewhere to go. Somewhere I can't take from you. Lena stared at the key, understanding what it represented. Freedom, real freedom, the ability to choose to stay rather than being forced to. You're giving me an escape route, she said slowly. I'm giving you a choice. Adrian's voice was steady. I'm proving that you're here because you want to be, not because you have to be. That's the difference between captivity and partnership. Lena looked from the key to Adrian's face, saw the fear there, the genuine terror that she might actually use it, might actually leave. But she also saw the courage it took to offer it anyway, to value her freedom more than his need for control. Thank you, she said softly, closing her hand around the key, for understanding what I needed, what I still need. Will you use it? Adrian asked. Maybe sometimes, when I need space or perspective or just to remember who I am outside of being your wife. Lena smiled. But I'll always come back because this, she gestured at the estate, at the life they'd built. This is home now, not because I'm trapped here, but because it's where you are, where Isabella is, where we're building something that actually matters. Adrian kissed her then, and it was different from all the kisses that had come before. Not desperate or calculated or weighted with ulterior motives, just genuine affection between two people who'd chosen each other despite impossible odds. When they broke apart, both smiling, Lena realized something important. She'd thought she could hide her baby from a powerful man. Instead, she'd built a family strong enough to protect their child together. Not by running, not by hiding, but by standing and fighting and choosing partnership over fear. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't simple, but it was real, and it was theirs, and it was enough. Let's go get our daughter, Lena said, threading her fingers through Adrian's. I want to tell her a story. What kind of story? Adrian asked. The kind about a woman who ran, and a man who never stopped watching, and how they built something impossible together. Lena's smile was soft. A story about choosing love even when it's complicated, about building families from broken pieces, about finding home in unexpected places. Sounds like a good story, Adrian said. It is, Lena agreed, because it's ours. They walked back to the house together, hand in hand, two people who'd taken the darkest path to something bright and true. Behind them, the lake whispered against the shore. Ahead, their daughter waited, beautiful and perfect and safe in the world they'd fought so hard to create. Lena had thought she could protect Isabella by running. She'd been wrong, but she'd found something better, the strength to stay, to fight, to transform darkness into possibility. To choose love not despite its complications, but because of them. Not a fairy tale, not simple, but chosen, and therefore unbreakable. And in the end, that was all that mattered.